So let me know if you can see and hear me. Um, we are here early if you are joining us, excuse me, for the recording. We have about 11 people in the chat room right now for pre-chat. As you know, I like to start early to make sure everything is going okay. And also just to kind of chat a little bit more informally with people. We have an interesting crowd here already. We've got Freefall, Philly Gale, Kit K Albert, Chime, Generic Pagan, Tim H, and Tim H in Australia. Eudemonist P-Bud is joining us from Warsaw in Poland. And we have which I don't know where is from. I am going to guess maybe Canada, but I don't know. And then we have BSG in the chat room with us for pre-chat from Nairobi, Kenya. So already a good little international group. Anyway, I have a little announcement that I want to make. Actually, several. Let me get my pipe started here. I decided to start it off tonight with a pipe, guys, rather than a cigarette, because while we're in pre-chat, it'll be a little bit more informal, and I can chug on a pipe. Anyway, and pipes I much prefer actually than cigarettes. But just to let you know, there is the new book, and what I've done so far, that is chapters 1 through about 2/3 of the way through chapter 3. This book may go long. I don't know. I have to tell you, this is a very difficult book, as all of them are, but this one in a weird way. And the weirdness here is there's so much that has been written about this subject, but not from the standpoint, with few exceptions. There are some interesting exceptions out there. This book is very difficult because there's so much to choose from. There is so much to choose from. So my biggest problem in this book is selecting what to talk about in a way that makes clear and will still be a credible argument. So this is a difficult book, folks. I have to tell you. I'm about back on schedule to where I need to be. I'm hoping to have chapter 3 done sometime this weekend. After chat tonight, I'm going to have to finish blogging for the week, and then get busy on finishing chapter 3 and chapter 4. So I might, depending on what I can dig up, I might be talking as well about CERN in this particular book. Now, the other announcement I had to make is hello, Busy Dealer and Susan that just came into the chat room. The other announcement I had to make is I did hear finally from Georgianne Hughes' son, John. She continues to deteriorate slowly. Hello, Down Under. Wow, we've got 19 in the chat room. Well, let me say hello to everybody. Susan, Catherine, 60, TSC, Generic Pagan, P-Bud, Busy Dealer, Eudemonist, Kit K, BSG, Chime, Tim H, Daphne O, Terry Lee up in Canada, Down Under, Philly Gale, Daphne O, and Freefall. So a good little group already. Georgianne continues to deteriorate slowly. This is unfortunately a terminal case, as I think everybody knew right up front going in. But she seems to be doing okay, holding her own under the circumstances. So that's the other bit of news. Let me fix my microphone here so I'm not jabbing at it with my pipe. But anyway, now another interesting thing we have today, this has been a weird week. because not only have people submitted a lot of questions about religious, spiritual types of topic this week, but I was also getting that in articles. So there must be something in the ether in the last 2 weeks about religion or spirituality or something. The other thing that is really going to be interesting in this chat, our one of our new members down in Australia, Jed Bond, I think he's in Australia. He submitted he submitted lots of interesting questions, but the first one really grabbed me, and in fact, it's caused me to look up some quotations that I want to read to all of you in response to his question, because it's a really good question about Apollo 11 and the hoax theory. All right, it's a really, really insightful question. So some good questions. We've also got comments tonight from I believe a new member in India. I'm going to be leading off with those because it kind of sets up the religion theme. All right. So anyway, that's what we've got going. And welcome to the physical medium that just entered the chat room. So hopefully, folks, hopefully tonight we won't get booted. I have scrubbed the computer as much as I can scrub it, clean out all sorts of caches and everything. So hopefully we won't go down. But again, if I do go down, give me about 20 minutes because I have to set everything up all over again. And it's very frustrating on my end because I have to do a lot of stuff and I can't respond in the chat room. So give me about 20 minutes. I might just also do something new this evening. I might, depending on how it looks. On my end, I have a little monitor up on the corner of my computer monitor that tells me how much RAM and CPU units I'm using. So if it looks like I need to shut down and restart, I will shut down the pre-chat and then restart as a formal chat. And I'm thinking about maybe doing that as a regular part of the format, but we'll see. I'm not using Internet Explorer tonight. I'm using Firefox, but I was using Firefox last time down under, so we'll see how it turns out. We have some really interesting questions. Speculation questions, you know, things of that nature. So anyway, it's been one of those days today, folks. One of those days. I haven't finished. Oh, I remember something else I needed to announce. The other topic of the last 2 weeks, and it's been very bizarre because just like the religion, people have religion questions, spirituality, that type of questions tonight. But the other major focus, not only in questions but in the articles I was getting, the other major focus was space. So I wanted to give everybody a heads up. Beginning Sunday on the regular blogs, there's a really interesting space story that's developing, and I don't know if I'm seeing things the right way or if I've gone off the deep end again. But look at those blogs and ponder them carefully beginning Sunday, because there is something going on, and it's very, very strange. When I first read it, what people had sent me, I thought, no, that can't be right. And then I thought, well, now wait a minute. These people choose their words very carefully. So watch the space stories coming up this week. They're going to be interesting. I have 4 days left that I've got to pre-schedule blogs. As you know, I pre-schedule blogs, so I don't actually sit and type the blog that day that you're reading it. It's usually pre-scheduled about a week in advance. So anyway, watch those blogs and let me know what you all think. So that's what's going on. There's so much to keep track of anymore, everybody. I just, I wish now in a certain way I were a lot richer and could have a staff helping to write some of these blogs, because there's so much that people send me, and sorting through the blogs, what articles, you know, I now have 4 levels of sorts. So, you know, I put blogs or articles as they come in into one of those 4 categories, and then I have to go back and sort through those. And it's really interesting seeing the patterns. This week has been this last 2 weeks has been space and religion. So go figure, huh? And there is a connection, obviously, between space and religion. If you've been following the metaphor really carefully, there's a huge connection. So anyway, translation, I've already written most of the blogs about space. You're right, eh? I like that username, eh? We're all gonna sound like Canadians here before we get done. So, and I know we have Canadian members. So we've got members now in Poland, Germany, Italy, Greece, Spain, France. We've got a member in France now. No, don't limit what you send. No, folks, don't limit what you send. Don't do that, please. The reason why I ask you not to do that is, even if I don't blog about what you send me, which, you know, the chances are likely I won't, but even then, it allows me to see some really interesting patterns. So don't limit it. By no means do that, because I'm kind of sitting back, not just looking at the articles, but at the subjects as they kind of go in these weird long cycles. Yeah, religion, Easter happened recently, or the Pascha, as we call it. But no, don't do that. I like as many articles as I can get. You know, it's interesting to see the patterns. It's just like here in the Vidchat. There are nights we have definite patterns. Anyway, it's very interesting. So tonight I've got to finish 4 more days of blogs. And hello, Ramura. And then probably I'll be spending an all-nighter trying to finish chapter 3. Chapter 3 and chapter 4 are difficult chapters in this book. The rest of the chapters won't be so bad. But this book also has some shockers in it. I have to warn everybody now. If you have political ideological commitments to the right or the left, this book's a shocker. It's a shocker. At least I hope to get people to question some conventional political mythologies. Let's put it that way. Anyway, and I selected a very careful icon to make people question political commitments. Email cleared my, yes, I did get your questions, Philly Gale. In fact, I have them, let's see here. I have them toward the top, actually, to kind of kick off the religion spirituality part of it. So anyway, this is going to be a weird book, folks. I have to warn you, but it's also going to be, I think for a lot of you, it's going to be a very disturbing book because it is in response to questions I've been getting ever since I wrote the Nazi International. The chief question being, well, where is it? What are they doing now? Well, the bad news is um, the bad news is it's alive and well. The really bad news is they're up to the same old thing. Just not with tanks, artillery, and dive bombers this time. So anyway, yeah, I intend to shock on. I intend to shock on. So anyway, quite a good pile of questions tonight, and I've saved Jed Bond's questions to the end. He also sent me this very lengthy analysis of AirAsia, which I don't think I'm going to have time to read tonight. I wish I did, but he sent it with a lot of maps and everything too, which I really can't show you. Oh, Peter tells quite a lot in the Hitler legacy, but not. I'm not trying to denigrate Peter's research there at all. That's not my point. But he it's not that he's leaving things out. I think he was probably faced with the same dilemma I'm faced with in this book: is what do I include? You know, what do I cut out? So I'm trying to include the stuff that he didn't include. All right. So anyway, hopefully I'll get this book done. Sometime I'm shooting for the end of May. I will let everybody know what's going on with the book. I've been posting little updates on my Facebook wall. All right, check my emails here very quickly, and we're good. What gives about the two frontrunners in the United States being Mrs. Clinton and Mr. Bush? What gives, very simply, is America's an oligarchy. It's not a republic. It's an oligarchy, and what you have are political dynasties. And the dynasties themselves are fronts for the corporate boardrooms that move in and out of government. That's what the American government has been for at least the last 50 years, is a revolving door of corporate boardrooms. That's all it is. End of May, I'm hoping towards Daphne and getting the book done by the end of May. That means the writing. Then I have to go back and proof it very quickly, get it in the right order to send off to the publisher. Oh, they can't declare co-regency. Then the American sheeple would wake up, which they're doing anyway. You wouldn't believe some of the things I hear from people in this country. And I'm sure the rest of you that live in the United States have probably heard the same thing. I'll have to listen to the Webster Tarpley. I forgot. Thank you for the reminder, Down Under. I'll listen tonight. And the corporate boardrooms are a front for the breakaway civ groups. That's a different question. Some are and some aren't. Some are and some aren't. I think when you look at corporations like the defense contractors, Boeing, Lockheed, McDonnell, Northrop, Raytheon, you know, in this country, British Aerospace, British Telecom, Marconi, in Great Britain, Dassault in France, Olivetti in Italy, Siemens, Rheinmetall, ThyssenKrupp in Germany. When you look at companies like that, yeah, I think you have a good Mitsubishi in Japan. I think you have a good possibility that these corporations have at least some part of their corporate apparatus in that breakaway world. Do I want help with basic typos? No. Sorry, I do not. I've had so many people offer to help me, and I thank you for the offer, Ramira, but I've had so many people offer to help me, but the problem is no editor, in my experience, can move fast enough for me. You know, when I have a manuscript out there in anybody else's hands, I want it back in 3 days. It's just me. And the other part of me is I'm paranoid about people ripping off my work. I know you wouldn't do that, but I just do not give out any copies of my books until the publisher tells me that the copy I sent him is at the printer. And I've had to do that because I've been ripped off. I just don't do that. And I know that the books have typos. It used to be that the publishing industry, see, this is another part of the dumbing down process. It used to be that publishers would hire an editor, do the editing in-house, and then send galleys a copy of the actual printed book to the author for a final glance through for any final corrections. Publishers don't do that anymore. In fact, one of my publishers bills himself as, quote unquote, a traditional publisher, and I had to remind him that this was what publishers used to do. So in other words, the dumbing down process is so bad. It's just interesting. P-Bud in the chat room from Poland is asking, what do I think of the writing of Rob Arndt on Nazi UFO technology? P-Bud, I don't know the man. I don't know what he's written. But I will say that if he's talking about Hanabu and Vril, I'm sorry, I don't go there. If he's talking in a much more argued sense, then I'd have to give it a good look. But, oh yeah. So anyway, are we still good, folks? In the chat room, physical medium has said that they lost the feed. Empath, welcome to the chat room. I think we're good. I think we're very good. Check my emails real fast here, folks. Uh-oh, just got a set come in. Oh, okay. I tell you what, this is weird, folks. I just had another set of questions come in from Liquid 911, and again, they're right. They're right in the zone tonight. No, I've never had an editor. I've never had an editor, Philly Gale, ever. Most of my books, what you see as you see the book is exactly the way it came off my printer. In other words, I not only write the books, I format them. So the formatting you see is the way I've laid the book out. In other words, all my publisher is doing is taking what I give them, sending it to a printer to have them print it up and bind it in a book and sending it back to my publisher. And I'm doing literally 98% of the work. So anyway, yeah, pipes are my preferred way to smoke, actually. I don't smoke them very often because during a vid chat they're too much to fiddle with. But I much prefer pipes to. I also am a sucker for a really good cigar, but I don't want to start a cigar. I don't want to start a cigar because I want to enjoy a cigar. I don't want to have to put it down and relight it. That why spend the money for a good cigar if you're going to do that? So anyway, which is interesting because I have a really nice cigar shop about 3 miles from where I live. I mean, really nice. No, I don't get 98% of the money. Of course not. Are you kidding? But I wish I did. I wouldn't have to scrape and scrounge like I'm having to do all the time. But that's just, that's, if I could guarantee that I would sell as many copies of my books by self-publishing them as I do through the publishers, if I had the same distribution, I'd do it. But it just looks bad, even in the alternative field, to self-publish books. And I don't see why that is. I don't see, how much does a good cigar cost? I saw some cigars, Eudemonist, in this particular humidor, which is a huge humidor. I saw some for $30 to $35 per cigar. So that gives you an idea. And there were more expensive ones in there, I'm sure. It's just the few that I saw. But I'm holding out for the Cubans to arrive. Because when I was in England, of course, I could smoke Cuban cigars because Britain didn't have an embargo on Cubas. And, Cuban cigars, they're still right up there. But there's other places that make very fine cigars, Dominican Republic and some other places. But anyway, well, they had Cohibas, but they had some brands there that were so top market I'd never heard of. The guy that runs this place is a real cigar aficionado. I haven't seen a place like this since I moved from Sioux Falls years and years ago. There was a really, really fine tobacconist in Sioux Falls. And he's still there. There's still this little cigar bar in Sioux Falls on Phillips Avenue that, big leather chairs and humidor and everything. You go in and smoke your cigar and read the paper and so on. Cigars, granted, cigars are the best with cognac or brandy, but I don't do that anymore because if I did, I'd want a few cigars with my alcohol. Put it that way. But anyway. So an interesting crowd here tonight, folks. We've got Kenya and Poland with us. I think France is going to join us at some point during the night. And Australia, we always have our Australian contingent here. And haven't seen much of our new members from Mexico. I think we have a new member from India now. One of these days, I'm going to have to do chats, schedule chats at different times for the people in Europe and the rest of the world. The reason I don't so far, folks, is I'm just swamped with work and personal things, and I'm really just kind of overwhelmed right now. Where's the Norway crowd? I don't know. Norway was here last time. I think we have 2 people in Norway. We've got 1 person in Lillehammer. Hong Kong, feeling groovy. All right, thanks. So we've got China. I suspected that we do have people in China, but you're the first time that anybody has said hello from China. So welcome to China. We've got Chinese members now. I don't think the India member is here, Chime. Let me look. No, I don't see him. You're out of Norway this month, so we do have Norway here. All right, cool. So we're all the way from Poland to China. So almost spanning the globe tonight. That's good. And we have members in Spain. Maria still watches. Come on, Maria, send us some questions. We have Belgium. In fact, our member, one of our 2 members in Belgium, has sent some questions tonight. We have the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, Mexico. I think we've got about 2 to 3, maybe even as many as 4 in Mexico. We've got Canada, Australia, Indonesia, I think Singapore, or Malaysia, one of the 2, and then now China. Cool. Jakarta. All right. All right, you're doing double duty tonight, TSC. You're from Norway and in Jakarta. Okay, that'll work. We'll click you down in both columns. First official 300 U.S. troops landed in the Ukraine today. I can believe it. I can believe it. It's nuts. It's nuts. Hot and humid in Jakarta. I can believe that. I can believe that. Winston, 1984, is in the chat room. I better refresh my window here, folks, because for some reason it just doesn't want to update for me very well. So let me do that real quick. There we go. 27 members now. So Winston, 1984, Frank, Base R. See if I missed anybody else. Susan, hello to Susan. Debbie in Southern California. Well, there's another country we can add to the list, California. I'm just joking there, Debbie. Any thoughts on Jade Helm? No, not many. I know there's a lot of hype out there about Jade Helm. You'll notice that I try and stay away from that type of day-to-day hysteria. I prefer the more prolonged hysteria. Echo Oscar, welcome to Echo Oscar. Let's see. No, we have a rather different pile of hysteria to get through today, folks. So be nice about California. Never. Never. I have good friends that are stuck there. So I have, I have sympathy. You know, it's sad. California has so much going for it, and it's one of the most mismanaged states that you can think of. Um, it's unreal. It's unreal. In fact, I may be blogging about California um, in the blogs I have left to do. Uh, it's sad. Anyway, oh, while I'm thinking about it, folks, while I've got you all here, there is a chance tonight that it may rain, and there is a chance it may be a thunderstorm and a severe thunderstorm. If I suddenly just disappear, it's probably because I've been zapped by lightning. So again, give me about 20 minutes to get back online. Sometimes the power goes out and it stays out for quite a while. California is a beautiful place, and it's not drawn that way. The problem is it's a terribly mismanaged state, and we all know why. It's because a particular political party has been running that state forever, and you know, it didn't work in the Soviet Union. It didn't work in Cuba. It's not going to work in California. It's that simple. It's going to be in the chat room. Susan says it's going to be very interesting to see how many people turn out to vote in the, yeah, I agree. I'm hoping the turnout is even lower. I'm really hoping that the turnout is even lower. I mean, you have the usual fake candidates now in the Republican Party, and we all know who the anointed selectee really is. So, you know, I'm just sort of come to Texas. Liquid 911 says we've got great barbecue, enough to make Yahweh's mouth water, but not enough to have the devil walking around here with bottled water. That's good. Okay, Liquid. Uh-huh. So anyway, I have seen weird radar patterns for sure. For sure. It would be nice, Chime, if the turnout was 0. I agree. How are they going to come up with numbers then? When are the elections, free fall? In this country, they'll be in November of 2016. I don't know the exact date, but they're always in November. And they're always on a Tuesday, but I don't know the exact date. You know, I'm a non-voter. That's the way I vote. You know, a pox on both your houses. So, oh, down under, if it's Jeb or Hillary or Rand Paul or Marco Rubio, it doesn't matter. There will be more wars. Where to go for answers inquiring minds want to know. Prime Minister Abbott, Daphne O, says in Australia has just made immunizations legal come January 16th. I don't blame you. Yeah, that's the latest scam, is to force people to be vaccinated. Never mind that there is a body of science that is questioning the wisdom of that. Well, if Prime Minister Abbott is an idiot, then what's President Obama? I mean, come on. Oh, my. Judging from Facebook, Susan says there is a meme already starting of no voting. Hear, hear. Here, here. That is a vote. That's telling them, no, your system is corrupt. I'm not going to be a part of it. To the extent that I cannot be a part of it, I'm not going to be a part of it. All right. Excuse me. Oh, I've been voting no confidence in the government since, golly, Reagan. that's how far back my no confidence vote goes. uh, yeah, you know, folks, if you pull that lever for the Republic thugs or the dummy crooks, you're going to get the same old thing. Freefall says that if Prime Minister Abbott is an idiot, then what's President Obama? And Freefall says a complete idiot. Well, at least Prime Minister Abbott is an incomplete idiot. So. Okay. All right. I'll buy that. Ramura, when people tell me things like that, I challenge them. I never let that comment slide, and it should not be allowed to slide. Our Declaration of Independence says that you have an unalienable right from God, and that doesn't mean that you have to vote in order to have that right. Oh yeah, no confidence would be full in a heartbeat. You bet. You bet. You bet. I'm of the George Carlin school. You know, if you get the well, if you didn't vote, you don't have a right to complain. Throw it right back at them. If you did vote, you're the ones that don't have a right to complain, because nothing ever changes. There's a certain political party in this country I will never vote for, because it has never been held accountable for its immorality. So, you know, that party has never appealed to me. But the other party, the so-called opposition party, just as bad. Echo Oscar says, thanks for the great webinar on conspiracy. Most appreciated. When is the next one coming out? Echo Oscar, I'm going to try to do a webinar a month. But as of now, I have no schedule for it, and the reason why is I've got to get this book done. My focus, I've discovered that my focus has drifted away from writing books, and I've got to keep that my principal focus. Chime, I haven't voted for a Republic thug or a dummy crook for federal or state office since Ford pardoned Nixon. So now I don't even bother. Here, here. I'm with you right there. Down Under, is the new book still in August or September? That's what David Childers put up there. I'm trying to get it done as soon as I can. And knowing David, he'll turn it around as soon as he can. So I will let you know when the book is available. All right. Empath says, what would happen if they held an election and no one came? And Philly Gale said they would just lie like they already do. But yeah, but the problem, Philly Gale, is their lie would be obviously a lie. All right, that's the problem. That's the problem. Right now, they get away with it. You know, they get away with a little vote ballot fixing here and a little vote fraud there. You know? So see the stolen 2000 election. So, yeah, that, you know, that there has been talk of that in this country. And, you know, talk about talk about the cynical mask being off. If it's a democracy, you have the right not to vote. If you are free, you are free, and if you're not, you're not. Of course, they're obvious. I think they're obvious. So anyway, yeah, we're getting ready for the American political theater. It's Hillary Clinton versus the usual Republithug crowd of neocons, and you know, don't get me started, folks. Don't get me started. Yeah, free fall, you're right. George Carlin did say that the election was the conspiracy. You bet. You bet. No argument. You know, the only thing I don't like about George Carlin is the potty mouth. But other than that, yeah, he was pretty on. Anyway, well, the chaos. Echo Oscar in the chat room says Americans are not going to wake up until the chaos is in their own backyard. Well, I happen to think the chaos is coming. So, and it's going to hit certain places in this country much more hard than it is others. I would not want to be in any American metropolitan area like Houston or LA or San Diego or that whole northeastern swath of yuck from Richmond, Virginia to Boston, Massachusetts. Yeah, it amazes me, Free Fall, the amount of money that people spend on all of this pre-election nonsense too. It really is stunning when you get right down to it. All right, quick check here of the chat room to see what's going on in the user. David Dampier, welcome. Didn't see you sneak in, so welcome to you. Oh, the East Coast. You couldn't pay me to be anywhere in California or the East Coast, Chicago, the Twin Cities. Mm-mm. Down under. I'll tell you something. If Dr. DeHart and I actually get the book finished that we want to write, I did 4 chapters on it. And he indicated recently that he wanted to finish it. If we get that book written, you will be amazed at the answer. But it's an answer I hinted at years ago on the Bite Show with Georgianne. The elites themselves, the elite, so-called elite themselves, have bought into their own propaganda. They have dumbed themselves down. So, you know, they can't think critically or outside their program if their life depended on it. Captain Jack, welcome to you. Didn't see you sneak in. Byzanter, the Twin Cities it's a shorthand American name for Minneapolis, St. Paul in Minnesota. That's a metropolitan area of over 1 million people. It's one of the few in the northern part of the country, Chicago, Milwaukee, that area being another, St. Louis. But the Twin Cities is the biggest metropolitan area in that part of the country, that far north. Then, of course, you'd have to go all the way to Seattle, Tacoma to find anything comparable that size, that far north. It's like Budapest. If you're thinking in European terms, think Budapest and translate it to Minnesota, and you've got Minneapolis, St. Paul. Okay. All right. Billy Shears is in the chat room, and welcome to Billy Shears. I've got to refresh that window because for some reason I'm not seeing all you people come in. I hope I don't boot myself in the process. 30 people. All right. Quick hello to Liquid 911, Busy Dealer, Base R, Byzantra Echo Oscar, pardon me, David Dampier, TSC, Winston 1984, Feeling Groovy, who is in China. We've got China, folks. Perimeter Breach. So welcome to all of you guys that snuck in. We're having our usual pre-chat banter here, folks. The Twin Cities, the Twin Cities, you know, being from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, I'd, you know, go up for a weekend in the Twin Cities quite a lot. And in 60s, 70s, even the 80s, the Twin Cities were quite nice. But they're just so big, you know, it's just another big metropolitan area. I do have quite a few questions and a lot of commentary tonight. And Chartreuse is in the chat room, so welcome to Chartreuse. So we're going to get started here, guys, maybe in about, I'd say maybe 40 minutes. Yeah, good morning to Australia and China, and good evening to Europe, or really early morning in Europe. I think probably, yeah, by now it's probably real early in the morning in Europe. Economists have been saying the sky, am I expecting an economic meltdown? No. No. I'm definitely with Secretary Fitz and her slow burn model. And the reason why, Chartreuse, I go back to this again and again. All standard economic analysis, every last bit of it, is not taking into account the enormous hidden system of finance, the black budget, and all of that. And so long as they do that, their analysis is skewed. They're only looking at a very narrow band of standard traditional things that economists have looked at, and that's no longer a model that is workable, because financial power depends on technological assets. Am I done reading the German books? No. No. As a matter of fact, I had more books from Germany arrive, and so I have been busily underlining. Fortunately, you know, when I'm reading German, I pick it back up, so it's easier. Once I get into it, it's easier for me to go much faster. But then I have to sit down and, you know, cram German into English. That's the problem. That's the problem. Empath, that's a question to ask Secretary Fitz. I Love Sushi. I didn't see you sneak into the chat room, so welcome. I Love Sushi is asking, is there one or more of your earlier books that you would recommend reading before your upcoming new book in order to understand it better? Yes. If there's one book in particular to read, it would be The Nazi International. But if you're going to read more than one book, I would say read The Nazi International, read Babylon's Banksters, read Financial Vipers of Venice, because This book is kind of, again, it's one of those books that I'm trying to collect some themes from other books and draw it together, and present it in kind of a contemporary context. When TV no longer works is when we will know that the you-know-what has hit the you-know-what. Busy dealer, do I think the closure of so many Walmarts is part of the slow burn? That one, no, I don't know about that one. That's weird, because one of those Walmarts is close to home. So that one is weird. They're saying it's because there's plumbing problems. I don't think so. Eudemonist, do you think the new economy Ms. Fitz is talking about has to do with BRICSA and the Asian Investment Infrastructure Bank? It has part to do with that, Eudemonist. Secretary Fitz's take on that, in part, is that they're building redundancy into the clearing system, and I think she's absolutely right. I think she's absolutely right. But I think there's more going on. I do think it's real factional infighting as well. Philly Gale says there are stories circulating that there was never a meltdown at Fukushima and that Sandy Hook never happened. I hate all the uncertainties. Philly Gale, I'll tell you what, when events like that happen, remember what I said in Roswell and the Reich. If you haven't read that book, it's an important book, even if you're not interested in Roswell, okay? And the reason why is I talk a bit in that book about the management of perceptions of Roswell. If you go back to what happened at Roswell, the military came out and said they had recovered a flying saucer. They said it. It's not in dispute. Then mere hours later, they completely changed their story and said, no, it was just a weather balloon. Okay? So in other words, what they did was they created extremes of opinion on both ends of the spectrum. And the reason why is when you do that, it puts people precisely in the position that you're in of passivity before a story. So the only way that you can deal with stories like that is to gather as much information about it as possible and then parse the details very closely. And it's when you start parsing the details that those extremes usually fall apart. Yeah. Byzantia, Hitler, sadly enough, is becoming popular in Europe now. I know. I know, and that's scary. People in a pinch use blindness to ignore the obvious. Absolutely. Welcome, Paracelsus. Again, you know, fascism is the easy fix to, and it's the same old dialectic. They let the progressive left-wingers push things so far that society gets into a big mess, and then the fascists come in and say, well, we can clean it up. Yeah, they can clean it up, but, you know, they do it by murdering people. So it's the same old dialectic, you know. It's over and over and over. All right, another cigarette here, folks. It is scary that you know, I see the same thing happening here. There is a slow, but nevertheless very perceptible tilt towards extremist ideologies on the left. I mean, the left has been doing their own extremist thing in this country for many years and getting away with it. But you see it on the right. And it's very, very disturbing. Yeah, Germany. That's true, Terry Lee. In Germany, the copyright on Mein Kampf expired, and I don't know. I think under German law, all royalties from Mein Kampf can no longer go to Hitler or the Hitler family. And there are still Hitlers alive, believe it or not. Many of them in this country, believe it or not. But Mein Kampf is now public domain in Germany. And there is a publishing house, I think, that is publishing a new edition with, annotations. So that's frankly, I'm worried less about the Germans as a population being influenced by that than I am the rest of Europe. The Germans themselves, they've had it with all of this, let's dominate the world stuff. And you can't blame them. Philly Gale says, I'm on the northwest edge of Washington State, and I have a Geiger counter outside that takes a reading every 10 minutes. It has never spiked above normal background radiation. That's interesting, Philly Gale. I can believe it. I can believe it. But you see, the problem is radiation, you have to understand, that kind of radioactivity is very heavy. So it will fall out of the atmosphere. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the radiation is not bad in Japan. I know people in Japan that say it's very bad. So it's not surprising to me. Oops. Sorry about that, folks. I just hit the wrong button. All right. But yeah, it's bad. Oh yeah, Chartreuse, you're absolutely right. That's exactly the sort of thing to look for. The other thing is, Chartreuse in the chat room just said, in Florida, we had a major grocery chain close a store only to open another on the opposite corner. They did it 4 times until they had built and closed stores on every corner. My first thought is this is what Catherine Austin Fitts and Joseph mean by businesses being used for money laundering. And that, incidentally, is something that I think went on in Spain. I think it went on in Portugal. And you see it in this country. You can drive down certain segments of this country on the interstate system when you're out in the middle of nowhere and see these big, huge complexes with maybe 4 or 5 semi-trucks, parked and fueling up or whatever. And if you go by these enough and see that kind of pattern of activity, how are they sustaining enough business for the overhead? So yeah, you can see that sort of stuff all over if you just start opening your eyes and looking at what you see. So anyway, tunnels from Texas to everywhere, underground. Yep, I believe it. I believe it. Michael Schratt, one of the speakers at the Secret Space Program conference. I don't remember if he told this little detail in his presentation there or not, but he has in other presentations. He has been told by people claiming to have been in the defense business or truckers themselves who have driven into some of these big underground complexes And one guy said you could take a B-52, you know, with the wingspan through some of these tunnels. Chartreuse, do you think the California drought and rumors of radioactive Pacific are ways to drive the cost of real estate down? Yes, I do, Chartreuse. I do. In fact, Chartreuse, I may be having a blog about the California drought coming up because I find it very peculiar. Oh yeah, there's a pyramid in Memphis. You can see it as you're driving on Interstate 40. Yeah, I've seen that pyramid many times. I've seen it many, many times. And gee, what's a pyramid doing in Memphis? And indeed, why are you naming a city in Tennessee after an ancient Egyptian city? Ah. Down Under ET says Graham Hancock has a new book out later this year, Magicians of the Gods, sequel to something. Something. Yeah, that pyramid is a sports complex, if I remember. Yeah, the one in Memphis, Tennessee. All right, folks, we will get started here in about 20 minutes. I do want to start early because I have such an amount of commentary that I have to get through tonight. I want to make sure to do it. Chartreuse, you're right on the nail there. Nashville is full. Nashville, Tennessee is full. Trust me. Yep. Now, William Henry does a fairly good job of exposing things. I like William. I've met William a couple times. I just wish he'd learned a footnote. If there's anything that will be on my tombstone as an epitaph, use footnotes. Yeah, I've seen that Parthenon replica. Feeling groovy. Opening, closing laundry method all over Hong Kong, Macau, and China. Yeah, China. There's something going on there. Feeling groovy. I agree with you. But I don't know if that is so much the Chinese government doing this or if it's Chinese companies. I've never been able to figure that out. I'd be surprised if it were something that the Chinese government is actively pushing. They might say, yeah, go ahead, but China is really trying to make its financial system transparent enough for people to get on board with their bank plans. Son of David, yes. Megalithic Yard, welcome. All right. I'm going to chance it and try and refresh my room so I can see the users list. William Henry's work on the singularity transhuman technology is chilling. I'll have to look at it, Perimeter Breach. To me, William's best work still remains his first one, and that's a book that kind of fell off the radar called One Foot in Atlantis. That's a very, very nicely considered piece of writing. Son of David is asking me, have I ever listened to Michael Savage? Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about. He's an American conservative talk show host. He's kind of like me. I tend to be more to the political right than to the political left, although I have some very left-wing ideas. Savage tends to be kind of like me. He's so fed up with both parties, he's kind of washed his hands of them. A few weeks ago, I actually posted a video or an audio file of Savage, and I forget who he was interviewing. I think he was interviewing Professor Peter Cohen. But yeah, I know who Savage is. I don't listen to Savage that much. I don't even know if he's on where I'm at. I think he is, but I haven't heard him. You know, I don't listen to that much talk radio because there's only so much Republican propaganda that you can stand. I can stand about 5 seconds of it, and then I have to turn it off. Anyway, empath. I saw an article today saying the Chinese Development Bank was prepared to spend $40 billion on the Silk Road through Pakistan. I can believe it. I can believe it. I suspect empath, and I kind of suggested this in my news and views last Thursday or yesterday, that the reason this Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is getting people like France, Germany, Russia on board is precisely that they all want to bring up the infrastructure in Central Asia, and including that high-speed rail connection. Feeling Groovy in the chat room in China says that Silk Road is the new buzzword here. Watch for it. Yeah, I agree, Feeling Groovy. I think you're right. I think Beijing, the Chinese government is playing this very, very cagily. They're doing all the right things, at least on the global stage. I can't speak for what their domestic policies are. I don't live in China. But I think at least domestically they're playing it very wisely. They're building infrastructure and not sending drones to bomb people. I mean, that's a pretty clear choice if you're living in Central Asia or Africa or Southeast Asia or wherever. All right, about 15 minutes here, folks. I'll probably take a little nature break and smoke a cigarette before we get started. We have some really interesting questions tonight, including that very interesting question from Jed Bond. I don't see him in the chat room, but some very interesting questions from Jed Bond about space and Apollo that I want to end the evening tonight. So I do want to get started early so that we can get through everything. And I know I keep saying the official start time is 8 p.m. and I keep starting half an hour early. I'm going to have to change that, I think. But just to make sure we get everything. Anyway, I'm glad to know that we have people in China, because we need people in our little talking community here to give us the Chinese and Asian perspective on things. Excuse me, folks. I do think one thing that China can learn from the Russians is the Chinese need to have a similar thing to RT. Have Daphne O in the chat room is asking, have you read a biography in books by Carl Jung? No, I haven't. I have not read that. I did get your questions, Winston. I have them, I think, toward the top tonight. I did make an announcement earlier, Paracelsus, about George Ann Hughes. I heard from her son a couple days ago. She continues to slowly deteriorate, but she's kind of holding her own. But again, everybody needs to remember this is a terminal condition unless some miracle happens and all of these naturopathic cures work. I think they would have if she had started them earlier, which I had encouraged her to do, but I don't think she did. So I don't expect that you're going to see any more bite shows, at least not from George Ann. Her son may take it over. I don't know what the plans are there. Interesting. That's an interesting question. Perimeter Breach is asking if they are having chemtrails in China as well. Son of David, I don't know if China is a royalty paying country, so I have no idea until if I get a royalty check for Babylon's Banksters in the Chinese edition, I'll be very happy to see that. But I have no idea yet, and I won't have any idea until the check arrives. I don't know what Chinese law is in that respect. I don't know the terms. You know, that was between my publisher and the Chinese publisher, so I don't know what sort of deal was negotiated there. And again, I don't read Chinese characters at all, so I have no idea if the translation is good, if there are things cut out, if there were things possibly added. It does not, from my cursory examination of the text, it does not look like anything was taken out other than some pictures. I don't know if they do pay royalties. Yeah, it'll be in renminbi or yuan. But our new Chinese member, Feeling Groovy, says that yeah, that they are getting chemtrails in China. That doesn't surprise me. A royalty check in the form of a bearer bond. Well, I wouldn't. One part of me wouldn't blame the Chinese if they did that, but you know, take it out on the U.S. government, not on me. I do think China. You know, the Xinhua news agency does have an English language website, but they don't have any equivalent of Russia Today, at least not as far as I know, which I think they would benefit from if they did. Yeah, yeah, I can see it now. Oh, goody, I got $1 billion gold-backed bearer bond, Federal Reserved bearer bond, and I can just see that now. If I tried to cash it, I'd be arrested and thrown into prison. If I got one of those things in the mail, the first thing that happens to it is it's being burnt. I don't want the headache. All right, folks, I'm going to take a quick nature break, have one more cigarette, and kick things off tonight. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Current discussion in the chat room about Benjamin Fulford, a joke, no credibility. I have to agree. It was convenient distraction, was what it was. Perimeter Beach says Joseph has a new bookshelf background. Very perceptive, Perimeter Breach. Quite correct. Quite correct. Minor differences between this background and the other background, although you'll see behind me all my books are still on the top shelf. And there's Jed Bond. So, here we are. Here we are. Let me finish this cigarette, folks, and then we're going to get started with the formal chat. And I'm refreshing my chat window again here just to make sure that I can see everybody in the chat room. A rainy walk. Oh, those are the best kind. Absolutely. Here, here. Here, here. Record Store Day. I keep seeing this reference to Record Store Day from people in Australia. Is this a national holiday where, where you go out and buy records? No argument for me. Vinyl is better. But unfortunately, you cannot get CPE Bach on vinyl anymore, so I have to stick with the CDs. I'm quite familiar with Gerald Massey. Quite familiar, Chartreuse, with Gerald Massey. Physical books will never be dead, and I'll tell you why. Electronic books are the new Soviet encyclopedia. Hard copy, hard copy, hard copy is the only way to go, particularly for accurate citation of material. Graphic novels. Yeah. Perimeter Breach, you know, that's the latest American euphemism. They used to be comic books, now they're graphic novels. Oh, jeez. Do I value Massey's research? Asked Chartreuse. Let me put it this way, Chartreuse. Massey ripped the veil off of a lot of things. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Somewhere over on one of these shelves in here, I have a big, thick book by Massey, and I can't see it right off the top of my head. So we're going to get started here in about 4 minutes, folks. Let me check my email. Oh, wow. Hang on here, folks. Oops. All right, I'll add this one. That's, boy, again, another, just a new question in from Winston 1984, and more in the mythology and religion area. All right. Let me get this filed in the requisite place here. I think we're going to put it there. All right. Okay, folks, let's get started. Let me get my questions in order here and do a final refresh of the user room. Crossing our fingers that we don't get booted tonight. All right, folks, we are live. There's the doff of the hat to everybody in the chat room. So let me welcome and say hello to everybody that's here. We have Down Under ET in Australia, Kit K Albert, P Bud in Warsaw, Poland, Liquid 911, Eudemonist, Base R, Terry Lee Ramura, Feelin' Groovy joins us from China. So we have our first Chinese participant here tonight, folks. Freefall, Paracelsus, Empath, Billy Shears, Catherine 600, Ailsa Freeman, Busy Dealer, James Fee, BSG joins us from Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya. Daphne O in Australia, Tim H in Australia, Chime Byzantra in Belgium, The Physical Medium, The Son of David, I Love Sushi, Susan in Australia, Megalithic Yard, Philly Gale 137, Daphne O in Australia, TSC, who is from Norway and in Jakarta, so double duty there. David Dampier and Chartreuse and Perimeter Breach. So welcome to everybody in the chat room tonight. Welcome to all of you who are watching the chats in the recorded version tonight. And I want to get started early because we have a lot of commentary, we have a lot of questions, and I just want to give everybody a heads up. If there are storms rolling into the area here and I get booted, give me about 20 minutes to get back on. If my power goes out, I'm at the mercy of the electric companies. But hopefully tonight we'll make it all the way through without any problems. Tonight's questions are largely slotted into religion, mythology, spirituality, and space, which, if you think about it, are both deeply related. I want to begin with a commentary because it's kind of appropriate to the questions. This is just pure commentary. There's no questions. I'm not even going to comment that much myself about it, but it was submitted by Mr. Dasa Vinayaga, who I believe is a new member from India. And he says this. He says, below are thoughts for your comment, should you consider them worthy. The question at the end is, for me, the challenge of our time. I have my own answer to offer, but I hope to read answers from others. Certain assumptions are persistent. Number one, the Anglo-Saxon mission is real and running behind schedule by perhaps 2 years. Number two, alien or perhaps advanced ancient earthling races or both's involvement in human affairs is centuries, perhaps millennia old. Now that, let me stop and comment. That's a proposition that I find possible, but my own personal take is that at some point in the ancient past, that intervention dramatically fell off, and I think it dramatically fell off as a result of that cosmic war and whatever, so to speak, treaty conditions were imposed at the end of it. But as I put it in the Secret Space Program conference last year in San Mateo, when humanity detonated the atom bomb, and more particularly the hydrogen bomb, that UFO activity, if it's representative of that intervention, ramped up considerably. So it appears as I argued there, that we're in some sort of Tower of Babel moment. Number 3, we cannot understand human history without understanding the degree of their influence in shaping it. And that's the debatable proposition. What has been the degree of that influence? Number 4, there are competing, even warring alien groups seeking to utilize our planet and its inhabitants for their own ends. Some are benevolent, some malevolent, and some indifferent. And personally, I don't have much argument with that, because I think if you look at the UFO descriptions of people that claim to have encountered these beings and take them at face value, in other words, accept them for the sake of argument. I have difficulties with many of those stories, obviously, but accepting them from the sake of argument, yeah, you get that kind of view. Number 5, various nations are aligned with various alien groups, and that has been a persistent meme within certain circles of ufology. Number 6, pardon me, the nuclear energy and weapon technology we are told we must fear falling into the wrong hands is a cover story. Just as NASA is window dressing to distract us from a vastly more advanced space program. Weapons have existed for decades, capable of destroying entire continents or the planet itself. And I personally agree with that, and the reason that I wanted to kick off tonight's questions with this commentary, and that particular point is the reason why, is because when we get to the end of tonight's questions with Jed Bond's questions, we're going to see how that particular thing plays heavily into his question and into my answer, all right? Number 7, the mutiny of U.S. allies to the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank is a designed scenario by the powers that be, who always knew the historical shelf life of a fiat money system meant that the Federal Reserve would one day become the loathed bad guy whose demise would be cheered, and of course would provide excellent cover for the final destruction of the American middle class in the collapse of the Bretton Woods system, the dollar hegemony, and U.S. prosperity. Now, I don't doubt, my personal take is, I don't doubt that that kind of planning may have been part of the process. My big problem has always been that this idea implies the existence of an overarching global conspiracy acting in perfect concert with itself in all of its factions, driving every little detail and coordinating every detail. That's where I have the difficulty, because I personally think the factional infighting is real, and here's why. We are definitely in the end game. Our technology has driven us to the point that we have created a global community, but not necessarily a global sovereignty. And there's a difference, all right? And that's what the so-called New World Order, so to speak, has been pushing for, is a global sovereignty. And human nature being what it is, you're seeing now the mad scramble for who is going to get to be the most influential faction within that emerging system. That's why I think the factional infighting is very real, but at the same time a coordinated effort. And I realize that that's another one of those both and points of view, not either or points of view, that's not too popular in alternative circles right now. But I think that's a very interesting take that he has here. 8, China therefore is playing the role designated for it, a sudden and brilliant rise to glory and dominance which cannot and will not be allowed to be sustained for long, leading to the final decisive global crisis. 9. Now let me stop before I get to 9. If you are familiar with the quote-unquote theology of the pre-tribulational dispensationalist school and their interpretation of end-time events, usually the book of Revelation, Daniel, and so on, China, the king of the East, plays a huge role in setting up the final conflict. And again, as I've said before, this is not a historical interpretation of any historical Christian community. It arose in the 19th century. It is a creature or creation of very dubious provenance. And as I've always said, if you control the fulfillment, that means the fulfillment is the deception. If you control the interpretation, you control the fulfillment. If you control the fulfillment's the deception. So be very alert here now as to the wider religious implications of what is going on. 9. At the appropriate time in this unfolding, the changing of the guard, war, disease, economic collapse, and alien invasion will be used to push the populace to desperation and welcoming the New World Order rescue. 10. Powerful mind control technologies will be utilized to so disturb and direct the people that their fear and confusion will keep them divided and focused on self-preservation. 11. And the Anglo-Saxon mission directed from the heart of the City of London will have its successful conclusion. The elimination of the Chinese, that is to say non-Anglo-Saxon DNA, and world population reduction by 50% down to a manageable size. We can assume, in my opinion, that nuclear war will be limited because the powers that be have the ability so to limit it, leaving the planet harmed but hardly destroyed. And we can also assume that safe and quite luxurious alternative accommodations underground and off-planet have been created for the elite should they ever be needed. They may already possess Tesla-type force field protection technology, and indeed, I blogged just last week about Boeing patenting a very rudimentary force field system, and that's public. So again, you have to project the public disclosure of technology and estimate what is actually in existence. We are already witnessing in the unusual Daddy Bush, Kissinger, David Rockefeller longevity evidence of life-extending technology. Now, folks, that second point is the other reason I decided to start tonight's commentary or tonight's Vidchat with this commentary, because that point right there is going to play into Jed Bond's questions at the very end of tonight's session, and it will play a significant part in my answer. All right? So, granting these assumptions, is there any hope for the dumbed down, unsuspecting, and ill-prepared masses who have become so accustomed to being harvested for thousands of years? All right. Pardon me. I think, Dasa, just to state my position very briefly, that the problem with any of these conspiracy mega scenarios is not so much that they may or may not be true. My problem is the much deeper, much simpler problem that any time you have a plan worked out in that detail, the problem always is once you throw the war dice, things always, and never go according to plan. So in other words, these people may be competent in laying out and planning such a scenario, but once they push the button and set it in motion, anything can happen. And the problem that they still have is what to do about the great mass of people. And my thinking has always been, even if they set such a scenario in motion, there is going to be something major happen to upset the progress of their plan. Be it a human reaction, be it some other sort of intervention, something is going to go wrong. In other words, again, think of Operation Barbarossa, the German invasion of the Soviet Union. Everything was going according to plan, and then something messed it all up. And the something, incidentally, was Adolf Hitler. He made a huge and hugely wrong strategic decision in the middle of the campaign and lost the war because of it. So in other words, we also have to take into account their own incompetence, all right? This is the problem. All right. Now, let's leave that aside and start now into the questions for the night. This first question is from Lisa Utrekin in France. All right, I don't know if she's here with us or not, and she didn't give me a username, so I have no idea if she's here, but Lisa is one of our members in France. And Lisa says, I will try to come to the vid chat in the middle of the night against all impulse, with all the noise about Iran wanting nukes. I keep remembering how you say that nukes are like firecrackers compared to some of the technology that has been developed. Any high-octane speculation about whether what Iran really wants goes beyond what we're hearing, unquote. Now, all right. Lisa, I think you are right. And the reason I think you're right is basically twofold. If you go online, you can find these stories coming out of Iran, incidentally, that have been circulating on the internet for at least the last 2, if not 3 years, that there is some Iranian physicist, I forget what his name is, who claims to have solved some key component of the problem of using zero-point energy directly as an energy source for human energy, all right? Now, if that's so, it's huge. And of course, the story has been denigrated and made fun of. It's just another wacky conspiracy theory, according to the powers that be. But my problem with it is that if you recall what I said at the Secret Space Program conference last year, I don't know if you've seen the second presentation I did, but my problem has always been that the dawning of the nuclear age. Keshi, thank you. Freefall in the chat room said Keshi. That's the man's name. You're right. My problem has always been that thermonuclear weapons appear to have been perceived by the powers that be, by their scientists, as being gateway technologies. And I laid out my case in that talk as carefully as I could, given my time constraints. You'll recall that when America set off its first hydrogen bombs, the yields were never what they calculated. In fact, in 2 instances, the yield far exceeded what was calculated, and in another case, it fell far below the threshold that they calculated. And there were also UFOs present at these tests. So in other words, the UFO problem was intimately coupled with the thermonuclear one. And that means, as in their thinking, the way I'm reading them, that they were perceived as gateway technologies to even greater capabilities. Follow me? So in other words, I think what you've had, since you're from France, you know that France is a thermonuclear power. It has the hydrogen bomb, and it has had the hydrogen bomb for quite some time. That was President de Gaulle's decision way back in the 1950s. France had to have its own force de frappe nuclear deterrent against not only the Soviet Union, but the United States, all right? And France, because it joined the nuclear club rather late, France kept testing its nuclear weapons. And the reason why I think France did so, and the reason why I think India and Pakistan still do so, and that China does so, is that they're finding out that there's another physics going on besides the thermonuclear chemistry aspect of it. So in other words, is Iran after nuclear weapons for some more distant strategic purpose? And the answer, in my opinion, is yes. All right. Now, that question, put that in the back burner, folks, because we're going to get back to that kind of thinking right at the end of the talk. All right. Now, this next question is beginning in the religious spirituality question, and this one comes from Philly Gale. All right. And this is an interesting perception of religion as a tool of dialectical manipulation. Listen carefully. She says, what are your thoughts on the idea that a male-dominated Western society where wars are waged as often as possible has declared war on what is called the abbreviated ISIS. ISIS is now a common household word in Western culture, although not for the ancient mythological description or who or what this person was or symbolized. In mythology, Isis is described as a feminine character, a goddess, a protective mother, and an earth mother. She's also, incidentally, Philly Gale, she's also the guardian of secrets. All right. So in other words, you often see Isis depicted with her finger over her mouth, saying shh. So in other words, Isis in the Hermetic tradition depicts that Hermetic discipline of not disclosing everything, particularly things that could be dangerous. So in other words, Isis also becomes kind of a goddess of wisdom. She becomes a goddess of discerning what can and cannot be said in certain situations and contexts. So she's often kind of a female counterpart to the god Tehuta. All right. So let me continue. Could this predominantly male-driven war against the name of our female Mother Earth have a bold but underlying aspect of intensifying dualism and or, among many other awful things, meant to denigrate the name of Isis and therefore upset the feminine balance at a subconscious level? All right. Now, I'm not on board with those who get all hot and bothered about the idea of the sacred feminine. In fact, I'm very much in the sacred masculine category, and here's why. Go back to what I said in Transhumanism. When Dr. DeHart and I were talking about doing that book, we were perplexed by running into constantly this idea of the masculine androgyne, and that seems like a contradiction, an oxymoronic expression, and we couldn't figure out why we kept bumping into it when you had in some of those ancient cultures very much the presence of the feminine in their pantheons, goddesses of wisdom like Isis. You know, what's this doing there? And I suspect that what we're really looking at, Philly Gale, is, as you aver, a heightening of dualisms of a sexual nature, but the sexual nature is being used symbolically. All right. In other words, we hear a lot in Western culture of the oppression of women, of misogyny, and so on. But what we don't hear in Western culture is misandry. We don't hear about the oppression of men. Look at the Western legal system and how it really is prejudicial against men in divorces. So in other words, the dualism that you're talking about, I think, is definitely present in Western culture, and it's being driven not just by men against women, it's being driven by women against men. And it's heightening this dualism to the point that the symbols themselves, as you're I think absolutely accurately describing here, that the symbolisms of these goddesses and gods are breaking down so that there cannot be any sort of functional balance in society. And we see that clearly. I see it clearly every day. To me, it's amazing. There are still jobs where if a woman holds the job, she's paid less than a man who would hold the job. This is quite true. But as I said, go to a divorce court in the West, and it's the other way around. All the advantages are weighted on the side of the woman. So there's a big, huge war, I think, on the sexes. And please note, Philly Gale, what I think one of those wars is. It's always linguistic. It's always in a perversion of the way the language was meant to be used. We no longer refer to female or male as the sex of the person involved. We now call it gender. And gender, if you look at the real meaning of the term, gender is a linguistic ascription rather than a biological one. So in other words, by saying it's gender, you're even making that more superficial, the masculinity or the femininity of the person involved even more superficial than it really is. So in other words, we are getting everything scrambled. This is a total war on humanity. And the most basic thing about our humanity, whether we be male or female, is our sexuality. It affects the way we think. It affects the way we look at things. It doesn't mean men are less equal than women or women are less equal than men, but it does mean that this kooky idea of an identity masking as equality, that idea is the big problem, and it's creating more and more problems. So yeah, is this being used to drive that dualism and confuse the role of the symbols, and ISIS with her finger up to her mouth? Talk about a feminine gesture, holding it within and nurturing the secret, you see. So yeah, do I think this is going on? I think it's going on big time, Philly Gale. I can't even begin to tell you how big it is. It's just unbelievable. There's a book out. There's a book out by two Canadian authors, a man and a woman. I forget what their name is. The book is called Sanctifying Misandry. In other words, not misogyny, but the opposite. The idea that males or masculinity is somehow evil inherently. It's an interesting book, and it's an interesting cultural commentary on where all of this is coming from and why. I recommend it to everybody. But is sexuality the basic dialectical tool of driving dualism more and more into our society? You betcha, I think it is. Absolutely. Yeah, in the chat room, Susan says, both sexes are under attack and demeaned equally and dehumanized equally. Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, now, along those lines and kind of getting prepared for our political commentary, this from the Son of David. Now, we're going to change gears here, folks. Son of David writes this. I love this. He says, what are your thoughts on dummy crook Senator Harry Reid of Nevada, who all of us, don't get me wrong, I have no use for Harry Reid, okay, who all of a sudden for the past couple of months has gotten injuries such as black eyes, large bruises on his face, and broken ribs. Some consider him the most powerful man in Nevada, a state which was largely controlled by the mob and the military-industrial complex. Even more, he's retiring this year from his Senate seat. I personally think someone or some organization roughed him up and threatened him for his past actions, or just the fact that they want him out. All right. Now, for those of you overseas in Poland, Belgium, Australia, Canada, Mexico, Spain, China, who are watching, Senator Harry Reid was the former U.S. Senate Majority Leader in Congress. He's a Democrat from Nevada. And in the last elections, of course, the Democrats lost the majority in the Senate, and Senator Reid became the minority leader. And then all of a sudden, Senator Reid started having these bizarre quote-unquote accidents. I'll tell you what I think is going on, Son of David. I don't think Senator Reid was being pressured to get out. I think he had made up his mind to get out. What I really think is going on here, and it's very, very, very suspicious to me. I think someone is warning Senator Reid to keep his mouth shut about something. And I'm as suspicious of the political left in this country issuing that warning as I am of the political right in this country issuing that warning. Senator Reid was in a very powerful position in the American Congress because as majority leader, he was the one that basically determined the composition, both majority and minority, of Senate committees. So he knew not only what was being talked about in each of those committees, he knew the people involved, all right? So, you know, a man in that powerful of a position is bound to know secrets. And I suspect that Senator Reid knew something that they wanted to make awful sure he never talked about. And the accidents, those aren't accidents. No, Senator Reid was not in that poor health when he decided to step down. Number two, Tesla claimed that he got his ideas, now we're back to religion, folks, from some type of entity. What are your thoughts on that? Does this at least kind of give credence to occult organizations who say that they channel information from somewhere or something? My guess is that at the least they get pointed in the right direction. Now, it is true that Tesla had visions, all right? I have never seen conclusive evidence that Tesla claimed that he was channeling or in communication with advanced beings, other than his statements in Colorado Springs that he was hearing signals from Mars, all right? But it is true that Tesla was one of these people who pictured his ideas first, rather than worked out mathematical formulas and so on and so forth. He would picture his ideas whole cloth in his head and then work out the details. That's how he came up with alternating current, incidentally, all right? Now, I do think that that ability, that intuitive ability to feel out or to sense advanced scientific or technological concepts is a fundamentally spiritual phenomenon because, as I've said many times before, I'm not a materialist. I don't think you can fully explain consciousness or mind on any purely materialistic philosophy or phenomenon, all right, or cosmology. Tesla, I think, was tapping into that information content in the field that we've talked about many, many times in our Vidchats in connection with the metaphor and in connection with analogical thinking and so on. And somebody in the chat room said Mozart had that kind of intellect. Yes. I think it's this ability to picture things. Einstein was another one who pictured things, then did the math, all right? So the basic concept, this I hope you understand here. When I say that analogical thinking is boiling things down to the most abstract conceptual basis possible, that's what I mean. This is precisely what I'm getting at. You picture the most fundamental abstracted basis of a common idea, and then you work out details, all right? So in that sense, I do think Tesla, who was himself an avowed atheist, that Tesla was nonetheless a kind of spiritual fellow, because he did have this philosophy that atomic particles, relativity, that there was something else behind it that was far more abstract, that was far more immaterial, or much finer matter, so to speak, in his terms, all right? Question number 3. What's the relation to the organization who had 200-mile-per-hour cigar-shaped blimps, and the Nazis or other elites who pursued secret propulsion technology and research? What could they have been thinking or doing during World War II, moon landings, and today? Were they the secret part of NASA and the backbone of the breakaway civilization, or something else? That's a really cool question. Okay, I'm doffing my hat on that because my friend Walter Bosley wrote a book called Empire of the Wheel Part 2, all right? And in that book, he talks a great deal about the late 19th century airship mystery and a secret society that apparently called itself by the acronym NYMZA, N-Y-M-Z-A, all right? And Walter came to me one day and he said, here's what I think NYMZA stands for. And he simply followed the clues. Everybody said NYMZA was some sort of German organization. And so therefore, Walter thought that all these people who are trying to give an English meaning to the acronym, to the acrostic, were wrong. It had to be German based, and he came up with a German explanation for that acronym. And then from there, he came to the conclusion, well, there's some sort of organization, both in Germany and the United States, working on this stuff secretly. And I think the case for that is absolutely convincing if you read Tim Busby's book, The Great Airship Mystery, that there's some sort of organization in both countries at that time working on secret propulsion technology. All right. Now, here's the problem that your question poses. I just talked with Walter last night, believe it or not, son of David, and I said, Walter, you know what we're looking at? You know, we've got this Nazi international thing that is after the war. We've got the Nazis during the war. In between the wars, we've got these very bizarre German secret societies that are doing this really wild thinking and speculation, and apparently a little bit of technological research. Then we have this American-German thing prior to World War I. So in other words, we're looking at one long organization, I think. And I ran that past him. And he said, you know what, I think you're right. We have to do something. We have to figure out what this is. And this is the problem, son of David. If you accept my idea that Nazism or fascism continued as an extraterritorial organized state, so to speak, after World War II, and I definitely think that's the case, that's what I'm talking about in the book I'm writing now, then this is the continuation of something that began prior to World War I, all right, and that went possibly as far back as the mid-19th century. So if that's the case, what is it? Who is it? And nobody, particularly within the field of ufology, even wants to look at the airship mystery in connection to the secret breakaway civilization human development of advanced technology. All right. Now, if that's the case, folks, if a case can be argued and made, no one has made that case yet. I want to be very clear about this. No one has made that case yet. But if there is a case to be made, then, and I think there is, clearly, if you've read Tim Busby's book on the airship mystery, there's clearly a case to be made. If that's the case, then what we're looking at in terms of breakaway civilization doesn't begin after World War II. It doesn't begin with Adolf Hitler and Obergruppenführer Hans Kammler in World War II. It doesn't begin with Walter Gerlach in between the wars, or the Thule Gesellschaft, or the Vril Gesellschaft. It begins even before that, and even before World War I. Somebody with a lot of money and a lot of brains is beginning to develop these technologies. And that means that this breakaway civilization thing has to be pushed back in history a lot further than people have been willing to go. Walter has been in my opinion, very bold and in a certain sense courageous in following out that idea. And quite frankly, I think he's on to something. So that case remains to be seen. Make of it what you will. Make of it what you will. Number 4. When do you think the secret war with our genetic cousins surfaces into the public view? The public enemy memes are running out, from communism to terror states to nations of concern to asteroids and finally extraterrestrials. And what move do you think the genetic cousins will make against the Earth? The elites are cashing up to their torsion-based technology. Will we get a grand fireworks show on the cosmic scale? Son of David, I'm going to suggest to you that you watch my blogs beginning on Sunday, all right? This coming Sunday, April 19th, all right? Watch my blogs for that day and Monday particularly, because there is a story out there that's beginning to pop up, and it's almost totally off the radar, It's beginning to pop up in very unusual places, and they're saying the same thing, and I have suspicions about the story. Uh, I'm not going to say anymore because I want to get people's genuine reactions to this story. All right. I want to see if people are seeing what I'm seeing, and if they're not, they can say, Farrell, you've lost it again. You're off the deep end. This is another Great Pyramid as weapons hypothesis. That's how crazy your idea is. All right. Now, this one from Perimeter Breach. Let me see if she's in the chat room here tonight. I think I saw her earlier. Yep, there she is. All right. So this one's from Perimeter Breach. She says, Joseph, I'm hoping at least for a doff of the hat, or maybe a touch of the brim, or a wag of the tail, for starters. If you think this is good material, then sure, use it for the Vidchat. However, let us add to the highest ranges of our day and to our question. I caught this plane overhead while chatting with my mother on the phone on my front porch in so-and-so. It was so striking, I put the phone down for a minute to take a few shots and then posted on Chemtrails Global Skywatch on Facebook for thoughts. I was astonished when a few hours later, incredulous and excited posters were asking me where I got this shot. They think it is a one-of-a-kind Russian transport plane, for on the side, noted for carrying the Russian space shuttle, a Russian Antonov AN-225 Mira, called Cossack by the Air Force. I know almost nothing about types of aircraft. See attached. One is an enlargement of the original photo, and she sent me the photo, and it's a Russian Antonov, all right? It looked unusual to the naked eye, and I thought related to the chemtrail planes in our airspace today. Could the purpose, here comes her question, could the purpose of the current massive and global wave of chemtrailing be combined with HAARP for that of the heating of the ionosphere, for weaponization, or for shielding from some sort of weapon or interference? Again, this is beginning to feel more than geoengineering. We refer you back to pages 149 and 150 of your Giza Death Star and the description of HAARP, its purpose, and practical application of Bernard Eastland's patent. And more specifically, quote, disruption of land, airborne, sea, and surface and subsurface communications, missile or aircraft destruction, deflection or confusion, weather modification, and since HAARP broadcasts within the frequency of the human brain, behavior modification, unquote, page 150. We are in mind of the disappearance of Malaysia Flight 370 and perhaps others. So, once again, the question, could the purpose of the current massive and global wave of chemtrailing combined with HAARP be that of heating the ionosphere for weaponization or for shielding from some sort of weapon or interference? All right. Oh boy. That's the fold off of the hat there, Perimeter Breach. And the answer is yes to both. Here's why. Okay. You're going to love this, folks. All right. Here's why, Perimeter Breach. If you look, and I think we had a question like this, similar to this, 2 or 3 Vidchat sessions ago. Now, if you look at the contents of chemtrails, many people have suggested, and some people have gone so far as I am familiar with the story, to have the fallout from some chemtrails analyzed chemically. And what they have uncovered is a mixture of particulate heavy metals like aluminum silicate, barium oxide, I believe, was one. There have been others. I think in one case there was even somebody that mentioned beryllium. I don't remember when that was. If that's the case, then we're dealing with not only heavy metals but particularly toxic things. Now, in other words, what they're doing is they are layering the atmosphere, the physical medium in this case being the atmosphere, with electrically conductive material. All right. So would that material therefore be a means of intensifying, if you knew how to configure the HARP or phased array antenna array that you're dealing with correctly? Yes, it could. All right. Because for one thing, what you're doing is you're creating the perfect conditions for local ionization and plasma, quite frankly, of the atmosphere. All right. That's the first thing that you can do. The second thing that it does is that, in my opinion, storms like hurricanes, and in this country, tornadoes, Australia, certain places in Russia that you get tornadoes. Tornadoes are primarily, in my opinion, electromagnetic phenomena. In fact, in the website, if you look in the papers on the website, the few papers I have in there, there's one on the electromagnetic basis of storms, all right, and particularly of tornadoes. In my opinion, these types of storms, because they are vorticular, are not simply based on thermal gradients. In other words, the standard meteorological explanation is that hurricanes and tornadoes are based on massive localized differences of thermal gradients. You've got cold air trapped above warm air, trapped below cold air, and the warm air has to go up and the cold air has to go down, so it creates a vortex to do it. That's the standard explanation. No, 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 no. There are too many cases of people who have looked up through the eye of a hurricane, or even better, the eye of a tornado, and seen massive electromagnetic displays, all right? And in my opinion, these storms are definitely electromagnetic rather than thermal in nature, all right? Tornadoes only occur in massive thunderstorms and in particular areas of the thunderstorm where the dipole is extreme, all right? The polarization of electrical charge is very extreme. So in other words, you have the thermal effect as a byproduct. So in other words, by putting heavy metals in the air, you're also creating conditions where, if you know how to intensify the local dipole, you can create massive storms, all right? So in other words, can this be used for weapons? Yeah, sure. Can it be used for weather modification and weather modification that's weaponized? Yeah, sure. Now there's a final application, as you aver in your question, and that is, could this also be used as some sort of shielding? Well, yeah. Why? Because by dispersing particulate in the atmosphere of the Earth, what are you making the entire planet Earth? You're making the entire planet Earth a big, huge Faraday cage. And what's a Faraday cage? Well, a Faraday cage is what you stand in if you are performing Tesla coil experiments and you don't want to be electrocuted. A Faraday cage insulates and isolates you by dispersing electromagnetic signals from getting to you. So you also wrap yourself in a Faraday cage if you don't want radio signals to get in or out, okay? So yeah, there's all sorts of stuff. The fourth thing you can do, and someone just mentioned this in the chat room, CSR something or other says a huge capacitor. Yeah, you're making the planet a huge capacitor. And why would you be doing that, incidentally? A capacitor is a huge electrical storage battery. And it's, if you polarize that capacitor and you've got the opposite polarity on another local celestial body, the Earth functions as a great big huge arc, okay? Okay? So there's all sorts of stuff going on. In the words of that Roman Catholic nun, I think her name is Sister Bertinelli, she wrote a fascinating book, and what she claims they were doing with all of this is they were weaponizing the entire planet. And yeah, all right, and why would they do that? Well, they would do that, as I aver in my second secret space program presentation. You do that if you want to leverage the idea that you can engineer systems of a planetary scale and weaponize them. All right, and why would you need to do that? Well, you'd need to do that if you're facing a potential threat of somebody with some pretty sophisticated technology of their own, wouldn't you? All right, so yeah, this is a huge thing, and the geoengineering I think you're absolutely right. This is about much more than geoengineering. It's about weaponizing the planet. And that means there's a threat that they are responding to by doing this. All right. I will say no more. All right. Let me stop here and say hello to people that may have snuck into the chat room. I think we have some. Becky Sue is in the chat room, so welcome to you. And Dave60 snuck into the chat room, and I think Dogman44 snuck into the chat room. All right, now this one from Winston 1984, and Winston asks this. He says, a lot of the books I've been reading lately, including some of yours, I keep coming across the character of Nergal, and so we're back to religion here. Now my question is, taking the revisionist history view that the O'Briens wrote about in The Genius of the Few, the character Yahweh from the Exodus that they wrote about, is there any connection to Nergal? Maybe you can clear these figures or figure up with a little elaboration. Well, very briefly, Winston, I don't think Nergal is equatable with Yahweh. If there's any candidate for Yahweh, it would either be Enlil or Enki. All right. But let's look at Nergal a little bit more closely. Nergal is the Erechal of the Assyrians, and therefore the Heracles of the Greeks, or if you prefer, Hercules, and therefore the Ares of the Romans, and therefore Mars. So in other words, Nergal is the god of Mars. Nergal is the god of war. All right. And I even made this connection way, way back in Giza Death Star Destroyed. All right. Nergal is the god of war. So is there a connection? Yes, absolutely. There's a connection to all of this. And if you look at the Babylonian pantheon, Nergal is very closely related to that whole Enki stream. Ninurta is in that whole wing. So yeah, you've got all of these guys associated with war on the Nergal side of things. All right. So in other words, it's kind of like the family plague. All right. All right. Now let's go to Byzantia. She says, number one, according to Ralph Ellis, there is a pyramid in the Himalayas built by the same builders as the Great Pyramid with similar topography. Have you heard of it? And could it have been a backup weapon or even the primary? Even scarier because of the remoteness, a fully functioning one. I have never heard of it. Actually, Ellis makes his case that the mountain in the Himalayas, K2, is viewed, in his view, as one of these pyramids. All right, I don't think that's the case. He's really arguing the case that the Great Pyramid and the Pyramid of Khafre are the Mount Everest and the K2 of the Himalayas. They're built to replicate those mountains. All right. I've never heard of a pyramid in the Himalayas. It wouldn't surprise me because it seems like we're finding more and more of them all over the face of the earth. So it wouldn't surprise me if you had Tibetans building pyramids at some point. But I haven't heard of any. I doubt very much it's the primary. All right. I doubt very much. I do think the primary, for certain geophysical reasons, has to be located at the Giza compound. All right. Number two, at the end of your vid chat for the 15th of March, you stated something to the effect that the cosmic war is still ongoing, the prize is humanity, and one of the whys has to do with humanity being a common surface. I am still reeling from the implications of that, and here are a few questions or thoughts concerning those implications. A, because every human being is also a common surface, every human being has a direct connection to that which is the unknown or God. Yes. 2, the energy to subdue this knowledge, if my previous assumption is correct, must be immense and continuously so. The elite's job is doing just that amongst others. Now, I'm going to suggest a slight twist to that, Byzantia. I'm going to suggest that and I've suggested this before in these talks, that if you accept the idea that the physical medium is somehow directly related to consciousness and personhood, although we don't know how, I've always viewed it as a very complex feedback loop whose exact workings and mechanisms we don't know. But if you accept the indicators both in esoteric lore, in esoteric tradition, and incidentally the very suggestive things that have been occurring in physics since the rise of quantum mechanics, that if you accept that proposition, then that link between consciousness and the physical medium is going to be one of the most sensitive and secret areas in which you're going to experiment. And that one of the experiments that you're going to run is social engineering, to see what, if any, effect may result from a group of people holding certain things to be true and another group not. All right? So in other words, what I'm suggesting to you is that possibly a massive program of very covert social engineering was established probably after World War II. We know that there was a massive mind manipulation program sponsored by the CIA called MK Ultra, but I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think it's much larger. I think remote viewing was a part of this. This program was a massive program of social engineering designed to test on a macro scale what, if any, effects might result to actual physical reality from social engineering. And I don't want to get any more in depth than that. But I think you see the massive implications of what that sort of testing could lead to. All right. C, humanity seems to be a constantly costly prize, and the benefit must outweigh the cost. Crossing the common surface, breaking in, and threatening diversity by encroaching in foreign territory where one does not belong, perhaps. Surfing the common surface, so to speak, and break in on any territory, perhaps. Is this already reality, or are the adversaries still working toward this goal? Or are the goals something totally different altogether? Now, folks, again, doff the hat there to those questions. Byzantra, I think that, and I've said this before, that for certain reasons that I do not want to elaborate, I don't think that the people running this grand experiment, and I do believe that they've been running it, hopefully someday I'll write a book about it, that the people that have been running this grand experiment know certain things, but they don't know everything. I've said before that they know their magic works. They know to a certain small degree why it works, but they lack a key. And they're desperately, desperately trying to find that key so that they can put it in the lock and turn it. I don't think that they've found it. They're searching desperately for it. I think in some respects they've come close. There are indicators out there, but if you know where to look, but even those indicators, if you read them carefully, they're missing things. And I don't want to go any further into that either. We're getting close to that danger area. D, The cosmic war cannot stop until all humanity is aware of being a common surface and understands the implications. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. E, a human has always the capability to awaken, so the subduing can never stop. Now, she just said a very important thing there, folks. I hope you heard it. Because the other thing that falls out of this idea that if you're going to run a grand social engineering experiment testing the hypothesis of the relationship between mind and the medium, the other thing you're going to do is to prevent as many people from understanding that as you can. Because once that gets out of the bottle, once it's common knowledge, and once the how, once that key is known, any group can get together and do it. So in other words, they want to find out, but they want to keep everybody else from finding out. And I think Vidchat is absolutely accurately hit the nail right on the head there. All right. Now in the chat room, down under ET said shades of Leibniz and Newton. Doff the hat to you, down under. You got it. You saw it. You saw it. Now, since we're talking about that, let's go to the questions submitted by Dr. Walter Bishop. And I don't even know if Dr. Bishop is in the chat room tonight. Let me take a quick look here in the window. We've got 40 people in the room right now, folks. I don't see Walter Bishop, but Walter Bishop did submit questions. I love the username. He says, Dear Joseph, thank you so much for taking the time and effort and patience and so on. Let me skip here. Says he's still stuck in Germany teaching, so he won't be able to be in the chat room, but he has questions. Question number 1. If it is true that Jesus said that according to your belief it shall be done unto thee, Vidchat, here you go. Here you go. If it's true that he said this, could it be that if one believes in a reality, such as hell, as part of a religious belief system, and then charges it with the powerful emotions such as fear of eternal damnation, one might inadvertently create such a reality for oneself in the afterlife, at least for a while? Dr. Bishop, if you are working on the hypothesis, again, that there's some sort of complex feedback loop mechanism that connects consciousness, personhood, what have you, to the physical medium, and therefore, since the physical medium is the great big nothing, capital N, that you can ascribe no, univocally, no category of human thought or concept to, which is also the same language used in theology, Christian theology, as a matter of fact, of God, and for that matter, Muslim philosophy from the Middle Ages, Jewish Kabbalism, and so on, the Ein Sof, then if that's the case, I'll leave it to you to answer your question. Question 2. Given the presumed matrix-like nature of our perceived reality, something of an interactive video simulation, partly co-created by our consciousness and beliefs, shaped via group multipliers, and acted upon by such practices as shocking the physical medium via blood sacrifice, doesn't it seem likely that if millions of people do this and buy into such beliefs, as expounded by the 3 Yahwist religions, this collective fear might, by use of the group multiplier effect, actually be wished or feared or visualized into actual existence? In other words, does it become a self-fulfilling prophecy? And to that, I'd have to answer to a great extent, yes. All right. In other words, if one buys into such fear-based scenarios, might one actually make a fiery hell a real possibility for oneself and others? Possibly. Presuming that these scenarios don't actually objectively, quote unquote, exist, but can be invoked or even evoked into reality, if enough people are led to believe in them, which then might be a reason for those elites who are behind religious social engineering, just like Philly Gale's question earlier about ISIS, to preach and instill the fear of God in us, such as this excerpt from an infamous sermon by Jonathan Edwards called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. Quote, "O sinner, consider the fearful danger you are in. It is a great furnace of wrath, a wide and bottomless pit, full of the fire of wrath, that you are held over in the hand of that God whose wrath is provoked and incensed as much against you as against many of the damned in hell. You hang by a slender thread with the flames of divine wrath flashing about it, and ready every moment to singe it and burn it asunder. And you have no interest in any mediator, and nothing to lay hold to save yourself, nothing to keep off the flames of wrath, nothing of your own, nothing that you can ever have done, nothing that you can do to induce God to spare you one moment," unquote. Now, what kind of God will be so unbelievably cruel, unless, of course, Edwards just wanted to make sure that those colonialists that he preached to stuck to moral conduct, and or he actually believed his scenario to be a reality and wanted them to change their evil ways? Well, I think he actually believed it, in fact. Alternatively, and this has been my suspicion all along, Edwards and many other members of the various religions and churches around the world, including Islam, didn't or don't themselves actually believe in such a hell, and are merely trying to A, scare us into submission as part of a much larger agenda, quite possibly true, by presumably the same elites who also want to shock the physical medium via blood sacrifice, and to a lesser extent via the mechanism of powerful emotions of fear and guilt. And B, to use our individual choice and collective fears as a group multiplier to actually manifest hell into existence. There's your social engineering experiment, for reasons stated in the following question. Now let me stop. Because once again, folks, and I'm going to go on a little theological detour here, once again, we're confronted with a huge difference between Western Christianity and Eastern Orthodoxy. All right? In Western Christianity, in the Middle Ages, the summum bonum, the highest good, was the contemplation of the divine essence of God in heaven. But the divine essence of God was that undifferentiated first empty hyperset, the divine simplicity. In other words, there was nothing distinct to look at or contemplate or to do. So in other words, you sit frozen for all eternity looking at God. Okay? You don't move. Movement is choice, and choice by this definition is therefore between good and not good, because that's the only other distinction you can have. Now notice what you've done is you've set that dualism right into God. All right? In Eastern Orthodoxy, the West, remember, speaks of the divine attributes. Orthodoxy speaks of the divine energies, each of which is distinct, each of which is not the divine essence, each of which is not equivalent to the other divine energies, and they are real things. So in other words, you can move around in God. In other words, you can still choose what you're going to be focused on and still be in the good. Follow me? And each of those divine energies is referred to as a consuming fire, or the warmth of God. But if you enter that state in rejection of God, how do you experience it? Because you are surrounded by it everywhere. And if you are dedicated wholly to evil, how are you going to experience all of that goodness? Well, it's going to be hell, isn't it? You see? So in other words, you have this idea in Orthodoxy that hell is the way that you're experiencing God. In the West, hell is a punishment removed from God. But how can you remove yourself from God? Isn't he supposed to be everywhere? You see? So in other words, the contradictions keep piling up. And one of the things that results from this is that it's in hell in the West that you see what? That you see diversity. Why? Look at Dante's Inferno. Where's all the diversity? Well, it's all in hell. Okay? So if you want to contemplate diversity, this is why the West begins to be fascinated with hell, because it's not boring. If you go to a Western church in the Middle Ages, what do you see? Well, it's kind of plain and Spartan, isn't it? And you're looking at one thing. You go inside of an Orthodox church and there's icons everywhere, so that no matter where you turn, you're looking at some manifestation of the divine. So there's a total, complete difference culturally in the way that these fundamental questions are looked at. So now let's go back to Dr. Bishop and question 3, okay? Might the above mentioned hellish scenarios be something that dark forces, human and or spiritual, actually want to manifest? Answer, yes. For similar reasons as their practice of bloody sacrifice? Answer, yes. Because what is sacrifice? It's the annihilation of life. It's the annihilation of the good. It's the annihilation of what? Diversity. Okay? This is my big problem with the sacred feminine, because if you go back to what the feminine represents in ancient cultures, it represents nurturing, yes, but it also represents endless repetitive sameness. It's the masculine that diversifies or distinguishes or differentiates or whatever. So you have to have both. You can't have this kooky dualism that we've been preoccupied with. All right. In other words, if the elites try to shock the physical medium, and please note here, folks, that what Dr. Bishop is saying is that he's saying that religion has been a primary tool in creating all of these things. And with that, no argument from me, okay? To elicit some kind of response in this dimension for their personal gains. Does it seem too far-fetched that in another dimension, such as maybe that of the afterlife, powerful spiritual beings might try to do a similar thing? Of course not. For the purpose of shocking the physical medium in that dimension and for, quote, sucking energy from our own hellish suffering. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Let's say a demon tortures us in hell. Could he suck that or extract that energy from suffering like a vampire sucks the life force like sucking blood? Yes, but ultimately this is why this idea of humanity as a common surface, or to put it in Judeo-Christian terms, the image and likeness of God, or to put it in Hindu terms, the soul, the spark of the divine, or what have you. This is why ultimately the choice and individual is sovereign. All right. Our whole struggle throughout human history has been precisely this idea of reconciling human individual sovereignty with the community. And it's been constantly what? The emphasis on one, or, hear the dialectic there, either or the other. Okay? That's why I keep stressing both and, folks. Both and. Might such a mechanism serve as a motivator for the devils or demons to steal our souls? Possibly. What else could the devil or demons or jinn, for want of better expressions, have any interest or anything to gain by dragging souls to hell? Precisely. It's the annihilation of the other and feeding off of the other, gaining power. All right. What do the various texts have to say about this? The Mesopotamian texts, the Bible, the Quran, the various Jewish texts, the Kabbalah, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Add the Muslim Hadith there. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Mesoamerican sources, etc. There are, in almost all religious traditions that I can think of, there are creatures, even in esoteric occult tradition, there are creatures, spiritual beings, angels, jinns, whatever you want to call them. evil, vile vortices, if you're inclined to be atheistic about this. You know, terms don't mean much to me. The concepts behind them mean a lot. In almost every tradition, there are these creatures that do nothing but live a kind of parasitical existence, feeding off of others until they kill themselves by killing the host. All right. So in other words, there is a principle of evil, but the principle of evil is always one of negation. All right. It's never one of affirmation. It never creates anything. It can only destroy. All right. Most interestingly, what do I say all of that? Is this part of the danger zone that you never tire of warning us against? A little teensy part, but not the core of it. All right. Hope this isn't too weird for your Vidchat group of yours or yourself, because I'm building up to something bigger. Okay. We'll wait for the something bigger. No, it's not too weird. You know, this is an open forum. Questions are questions. All right. Let's get to Leo Swart. All right. And Leo, I believe, is in New Zealand. So, yeah, we have members in New Zealand. All right. He says, recent Vidchats have been of a stunningly profound quality. I hope this continues. Here are some more questions I have. Number one, there are many references in your books with phrases like altering the fabric of local space-time or changing or affecting the geometry of local space-time and so on. Could you explain in simple terms exactly what you mean by this? I've always taken it to be the Einstein things like time being shortened for someone who goes out into space near the velocity of light, or space being bent by local gravitational distortions. Is this what you are referring to, or is there more to it? Yes, it's what I'm referring to, and yes, there is more to it. Let's take my example that I've used so many times of the empty aluminum soda can to represent torsion, all right? So let's take our soda can, and what we're going to do is we're going to take a magic marker, a Sharpie or something, and we're going to put dots on our soda can in regular rows and columns, just like wrapping graph paper around our soda can. We're going to mark it all with dots all the way around the soda can so that you can see this grid on the soda can, all right? Now, what these dots represent is what in relativity theory would be the metric, all right? And when you say, whenever you read a paper about relativity or anything like this, you're going to see this word metric. Well, what are they talking about? What's this metric, all right? Well, the metric is simply how far apart you're spacing your dots, okay? If you've got dots close together, you've got a small metric. If you've got dots wide apart, you've got a big metric, all right? So let's take this grid that we've put on our soda can. Let's say that we've made the dots relatively close together, so we've got a lot of dots in the small metric, all right? Now we're going to take that soda can now and we're going to wring it like a dish rag. We're going to counter rotate the two ends of the can at the same time. Now what happens to those dots when you do that? Well, the dots are going to move, all right? The dots are being twisted and the ends of the can are being drawn closer together. So what you're doing, if that can now represents the fabric of space-time, and you add the element of torsion or rotation to it, which is not, incidentally, what's going on in Einstein, please note. If you now add that element of rotation, what you're doing is you're crumpling space-time. You are altering the fabric of space-time. And what tensor calculus does is it allows you to measure the displacement. There's your grid and there's your metric again. It allows you to measure the amount of displacement of that twist. And that displacement is what they are really meaning in certain circumstances when they talk about the metric of the torsion tensor. That's the amount of displacement that you're getting. That's what the equations are describing to you. All right, so yeah, so you're absolutely right. Einstein is talking about one type of distortion. Torsion is talking about another. So you have to have kind of a both-and thing here. Secondly, what do you believe is the origin of space and time and consciousness? How is it maintained in ongoing existence? Well, Personally, for my part, I believe that intelligence or mind or personhood, whatever you want to call it, is the origination of everything else. All right. But we have to be careful there again, because what we're doing is we're projecting analogically our consciousness, our mind, our personhood onto a much greater context, that empty hyperset. So we have to speak in terms of mega consciousness or super consciousness. And indeed, you'll find some of the ancient philosophers, you'll find some of the ancient church fathers using that very word, super, to imply the idea that at this point, when you apply these terms in that context, they begin to break down. All right. So in other words, we always have to remember that that nothing is a nothing because the concepts we bring to it inevitably break down. All right. But once you understand that, then everything else begins to make sense, because everything else becomes an analogy, you see, of what this ultimate thing, person, whatever you wish to call it, is. All right. So in my opinion, you have, just like Immanuel Kant, if you read Kant very carefully, the Critique of Pure Reason, and it's interesting that you have this philosophy arising in Germany, because where does quantum mechanics arise? Well, it arises in Germany. Well, what does Kant say? Kant says that space and time are constructs that the mind brings to experience a priori in order to organize it, that space and time themselves are not a result of matter or arise from matter or can be explained by any purely material thing. They are constructs of the mind. Now that's quite a whopper once you stop and think about it. But once you understand that this is the context in which Enlightenment Germany begins to think, then it's no surprise that you see quantum mechanics, relativity, and these ideas. What are they? Well, they're the mathematicized expressions of the Kantian turn in philosophy. That's what they are. In other words, what they've done is they've put Kant's thought in equations, okay? And then they've gone on to test it. Well, is it true? Are there indications that this is true? And as it turns out, there are, okay? This is the big thing that begins to happen in the Enlightenment. Now, he says, a change of focus. What underlies the biblical practice of sacrificing animals to God? Just what is it about the smoke of burning flesh that is so pleasant to his nostrils? Well, let's remember something. Is it God or is it Yahweh? Now, for some of us, the equation God equals Yahweh is not a true equation. For some of us, that equation should be written, God is not equal to Yahweh, all right? But now that we've established that in the text, it's Yahweh that's demanding these sacrifices, and not really demanding them, but saying, okay, yeah, you know, if you want to do this, go ahead, here's how you do it, all right? What is it that's so pleasing and pleasant to his nostrils? There's that famous text that Noah offered sacrifice and the smoke was well-pleasing to God. So what's so pleasant to his nostrils? And the sacrificing of one's son, as with Abraham and Christ, and that this somehow absolves others of their sins. What gives with this? Christians commemorate this with ritualized cannibalism in the Eucharist, eating their own God. Please remember again, Mr. Swart, that this doctrine that you are implying is not the doctrine of the Eastern Church. It is a doctrine more or less in this distortion peculiar to the Western Church. Okay? Please remember, you cannot univocally speak of Christianity. There is a huge theological, cultural difference between the East and the West, even on this point. In fact, on all points of doctrine. All right? But now, let's address the question. What is it that's so pleasing? If you go, Mr. Swart, to a church father by the name of, he's called by various different names. In the West, he's known as Gregory Nazianzus, N-A-Z-I-A-N-Z-U-S. Ianzus, Nazianzus. Sometimes the West calls him St. Gregory the Divine, which is simply the Western term for theologian, which is how he's referred to in the East, St. Gregory the Theologian, all right? St. Gregory the Divine, same thing. If you read St. Gregory, he's one of the very first Greek fathers to address this notion of sacrifice. And he says something to the effect, well, who's this sacrifice being paid to? And he comes right out and says, God didn't demand it. And if it's being offered to the devil, fie on the outrage, why should you sacrifice this to him? So, like the Greek fathers often do, when they're confronted by a question that they can't answer, they simply say, well, I can't answer this. We don't know why. All right? Now, once we've said that, I think you can see already that this is why you never see an Anselm arise in the Eastern Church. Anselm, you recall, is this guy that says, well, mankind pissed off the infinitely righteous God, and in so pissing off the infinitely righteous God was infinitely pissed off, and man owed God an infinite debt which finite man couldn't pay, and therefore the infinite God had to become man, pay the debt as finite man, and cancel and balance the divine account books. That's literally the doctrine, and it's that kooky, all right? This is the reason why you never have an Anselm, and therefore the idea of sacrifice in this sense in the East. It's a different, totally different sort of thing, all right? This is why the Anglican Church, when it breaks with Rome, begins to talk of the Eucharist not as a bloody sacrifice or a connection in that sense, but as a sacrifice of thanksgiving. All these ideas are percolating. So let's go back to Yahweh. Why the demand for sacrifice? Well, again, if you've been following what we've been talking about with other questions, the key moral question here is, again, bring it in terms of analogy. When you forgive someone of an offense that they have done to you, maybe they've cost you a fortune of money or something like this, or maybe they did you physical harm in some sense, and you forgive them, all right? Do you, let's say your children have done something to you, or you did something to your children. Do you, when you forgive them, or they you, demand that they go out, buy a turtle dove, and wring its neck? No. Do you demand that they pledge their firstborn to you as a sacrifice in order to receive that forgiveness? Well, again, no. So in other words, in human terms, even for the most basic, egregious, grievous offenses, we do not have the idea that blood is demanded in order to forgive someone. And by extension, if we are made in the image and likeness of God, then why should God? So in other words, what Gregory of Nazianzus is telling you is this is the logic that makes no sense. And we don't have an answer to it. And we don't, all right? But if you stop and think about it, and the character of Yahweh in the Old Testament, he's the ones that's wanting this and delights in it. And who delights in the destruction of life and the annihilation of diversity, especially in order to forgive somebody and exercise love? I'll leave it to you to answer that question. All right. Let's get to Down Under ET, because we're not done we are not done with the Yahwist religions by any stretch of the imagination. Folks, I have got to have a cigarette after that one. Great question, Leo. I'm doffing the hat. Great question. All right. Very quickly. Down Under says, Joseph, I've just finished reading The Fourth Crusade and the Sack of Constantinople by Mr. Jonathan Phillips. The book describes Mr. Phillips as a senior lecturer in medieval history at Royal Holloway, the University of London. The book is 320 pages long, and I would describe the book as highly descriptive and even label it as a blow-by-blow recount of the Fourth Crusade and the sacking of Constantinople. However, astoundingly, the author never uses the words Knights Templar anywhere in the book. All of the usual suspects are there, the blind Doja, Enrico Dandolo, and so on. And you covered the Fourth Crusade in your book, Financial Vipers of Venice and Thrice Great Hermetica. And so I have a few questions regarding this crusade and the involvement of Venice and the Templars. Now remember, folks, in Thrice Great Hermetica, I presented to you detailed, specific connections between the Templars, the Fourth Crusade, and the papacy, all right? In the form of a letter that was written by King Baudouin, I think it was, I forget who the Latin emperor was, that had sent a letter to the Pope, Innocent III, carried by Brother So-and-so, meaning a Knight Templar, all right, and that the Knights Templars gained certain privileges in the Eastern Empire as a result of Venice's sacking, implying all of this implying, of course, that the Templars were involved, which they were, okay? So his question number one is, can you speculate why such a noted medieval history professor would write a book on the Fourth Crusade and not mention the Knights Templar? Sure, I can speculate. Number one, he didn't know about the detail. Okay? In other words, you have to understand, I'm not slighting the man. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not slighting the man, because if you know anything about how much stuff there is to learn and know about the Middle Ages, no one can possibly know everything. I mean, you know, my degree is in patristics, and I can tell you that just learning how to negotiate your way through the 140 volumes of just the Greek Patrologia, not even including the Latin one, is a nightmare in and of itself, because there's no index, okay? So in other words, you have to know just an awful amount of stuff. And I'm not slighting the guy. He probably simply didn't even know of the existence of this little factoid that's there in an obscure little article that's published in an obscure little journal. I think it was in Malta, all right? So that's my first explanation. But let's assume he did know, okay? Now let's really speculate. Let's assume he did know. I can just bet you bet you dollars to donuts down under that if he did know, and the reason that he didn't mention it is that he knew that if he did, he'd be opening a Pandora's box of, here come the words, conspiracy theory. Because their presence in the Fourth Crusade raises the ante of what you have to explain considerably. And you cannot do it, period, without speculating along the lines that I did in Thrice Great Hermetica. Simply cannot be done. And as an academic, your real job in academics now, unfortunately, in the United States, France, Germany, Belgium, the United Kingdom, Italy, Spain, Canada, Australia, your principal job as an academic is now as a gatekeeper of bland, placid orthodoxy. We don't, in other words, we don't go there. And that's the bottom line. Question 2. What do you believe is the true reason why the Knights Templars were formed in the first place? As I suggested strongly in Thrice Great Hermetica, they were formed for several principal reasons, all right? In other words, this is like all other covert operations. They have a multitude of objectives which they are going to accomplish in one grand operation. The first objective is recover whatever knowledge they knew, and certainly all the indicators are there, that they knew prior to going to Palestine was there, all right? Number 2, they were formed as a mechanism of bypassing the power of local bishops, counts, dukes, barons, kings, princes, what have you, to create a mechanism, if you will, sort of the first experiment in a transnational corporatist globalist culture to move capital and reduce risk in the movement of that capital. If you look at what I said in Thrice Great Hermetica carefully, this is exactly what they're doing. All right. And they're doing it deliberately. And they're doing it, incidentally, by borrowing certain concepts from the Islamic world, which the Islamic world had been practicing for centuries. All right. So in other words, this is the other thing. And thirdly, they are formed, as I also averred, as the first professional standing army in Western Europe since the fall of the Roman Empire. In other words, they're a military-industrial complex directly under the papacy. So in other words, now the papacy, you see, has an international army. The papacy is the UN of the day, and it has an actual international army drawn from all over Europe that it can send anywhere to do its bidding. And it tries this in the Albigensian Crusade, and whoop, lo and behold, the Templars aren't responding. And neither, for that matter, are the Knights Hospitallers, the other great military arm of the papacy. So in other words, the threat that the papacy has is now all of a sudden, uh-oh, it's not there. We don't have those puppets on the ends of those strings anymore. That's exactly what the Knights Templars are. Fourthly, okay, if you're going to move money and capital without risk from Palestine to Edinburgh, Scotland, if you're going to do that, what do you have to have? Well, the other thing you have to have is a lot of intelligence. So in other words, this is one big, huge military, industrial, financial intelligence complex looking for secret information, recovering secret information most likely, and preserving whatever that was. Absolutely. Thirdly, is it possible that Godefroy de Bouillon was handed ancient knowledge from his father, which had been handed down from his father, and so on? Simple answer, needs no explanation, yes. 4, is it also possible that the Knights Templar informed the Venetians that they did indeed have possession of ancient knowledge and used this carrot to get Venice involved in support of the Templars' mission? Answer, yes. But please note, remember what I said in Financial Vipers in Thrice Great Hermetica. The knowledge of secrets could equally have run the other way. Okay? And probably in this case, both are true. Oh, we've got this bit of information. Well, that's interesting. We've got this bit of information. Let's go over there and sack Constantinople and find out what the Greeks know. Okay, so yeah, you got the picture. 5, is there any evidence of a connection between the Templars and today's elites? Idem est, who would be a modern version of the Templars? All right, easy enough. I hate to tell you this, but one modern version of the Templars would be, guess who? You got to be involved in banking. You've got to be involved in secret knowledge. You've got to be extraterritorial. You've got to be an intelligence organization. Who fits that bill? Okay, I'll leave it to you down under. I think you know. You can think of several, all right? All right, this one from Liquid 911, and finally, after Liquid 911, we are going to get to Jed Bond. We've been building up here, folks, to the climax. All right, this one from Liquid 911. He says, here's a couple for you. Have fun. Okay. Number 1, could age progression in the physical sense, and now you know why I'm putting Liquid right before Jed Bond and why I started off with Dasa, all right? Could age progression in the physical sense be planet determinate regarding humanity's case? Would aging slow down in something that is no longer harmonically resonant to its existential host and acquire the resonant and beat frequency of its transplanted link? Now, stop. Liquid, I'm doffing the hat to you. All right. I'm doffing the hat to you, Liquid, because what you've really said is aging a function of the gravitational and electromagnetic content of local space. In other words, is aging the template of something going on in the macro system? Answer, yes, it is. Okay, I'm not going to say why, because we're going to hold that one back to Mr. Jed Bond. But let's look at something very significant here. Right now, NASA has released a story. I don't know if any of you caught this. NASA has released a story that they're willing to pay $18,000 for 70 volunteers to do nothing but lay in bed for 70 days straight. Now, I'm not taking that option, because being a smoker and being sedentary, the last thing I need to be doing is laying in bed and doing nothing else but laying in bed for 70 days. Okay. But all right, the interesting thing is, why is NASA doing this? Well, NASA, like every other space agency, has already discovered that the longer you stay in zero gravity, the more your muscles and your body atrophy. So in other words, you gain your strength and your health to a certain extent by being in a locally massive gravity well. Okay, follow me? So let's change that gravity well from planet Earth 1G to Mars 1/3 G. Okay, what happens to your health? Or conversely, let's say that we recreate planet Krypton with a gravity of 2G on a daily basis. What happens to your health? Is this going to have a physiological effect on aging? Quite possibly. Quite possibly. Therefore, second question. Transhumanism. In the beginning of the book, there's a description given of the androgynous being with two sets of both arms and legs. The same artistical description is given by Leonardo da Vinci for his Vitruvian Man. Is there a connection? Absolutely, there's a connection. And guess what Vitruvian Man is? Here's a clue for you, Liquid. Remember that Leonardo is working where? Well, he's working in Florence, all right? What's Florence at this time? Well, Florence is the beating heart of the Italian Renaissance. Why? Because Cosimo de' Medici, remember him? The Doge of Florence has decided that he's going to send Ficino out to find the Hermetica. Sure enough, Ficino finds the Hermetica, brings Greek copies back, and he has him stop his translation of Plato and begin the translation of the Hermetica. But let's look at Plato for a moment. If you recall, in the banquet or the symposium where Plato is talking about this primordial androgyny, how does he describe it? Well, he describes it as what? A ball. Okay? So in other words, Leonardo's Vitruvian Man, remember, Leonardo's Vitruvian Man is a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional reality. So Vitruvian Man isn't describing a circle, he's describing a sphere. So in other words, Leonardo's Vitruvian Man is a little allusion to Plato's androgynous sphere, when the two sexes were united, and when they were united, they were kind of like a ball. They traveled around as a ball would roll. All right. So there's your link. Number 3, ancestral memories embedded in DNA. DNA has the signature of a radio receiver transducing the etheric output signal of a rotated lattice, structured potential, vectored into 3 dimensions. I love this. Could light-activated genes also induce the memories of those sharing the same grid pattern of memories? You betcha. You betcha. As it were, both individually or in a group, ancestral memories. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll go you one further, Liquid. If you snoop around long enough, you're going to find some very bizarre experiments that scientists are doing now with what? DNA and lasers. And lo and behold, why are they doing this? Well, they're discovering that DNA is storing information in ways that they hadn't even imagined. Why? Well, what is DNA again? It's an periodic, fill in the blank. All right. Question number 4. He says this is a gaming scenario. I take it this is kind of a fun question. He says a shift in the Poincaré time stream has allowed he's referring to the famous French mathematician Raymond Poincaré. All right, has allowed the following time stream to occur. And incidentally, Poincaré was one of the people not only experimenting with torsion, but he was creating a totally even beyond torsion idea called spinners, all right, along with Émile Cartan. Nikola Tesla, Alexander of Macedonia, and yourself, equipped with the tablets of destinies and all the technology, lightsabers included, are put to the task of defending Earth against the invasion from the galactic empire of Star Wars, the shadows from Babylon 5. NASA's predicting arrival will be in 3 days. DARPA has the Iron Man suits ready and the toys are being prepared. What do you do? All right. Me? What would I do? I'd do exactly like Perimeter Breach suggested earlier. Weaponize planet Earth, and when they show up, zap them. Blow them out of the sky. All right. Okay, folks. Stretch here. Stretch, because we are now at the denouement of this evening's vid chat with Jed Bond, who has sent me a lengthy commentary on the crash of AirAsia 8501 with diagrams, which unfortunately I can't really show to you because I don't think they're going to show up on the screen. But basically he's concluding, and the reason I'm summarizing, Jed, please forgive me, I don't want to detract from your questions here. So I'm setting AirAsia aside in a summary, if you don't mind, because he's concluding based on a very detailed analysis. And what you should do, Jed, is resubmit this as a comment or something on the website. I don't know how to do this. I want to share this somehow, but I don't know exactly how to do it. Maybe put it in the comments section to this vid chat, because I think people need to read your analysis here. All right. But I don't know that the diagrams that you included are going to show up. But basically, he's concluded that AirAsia has possibly made a controlled landing when it crashed. And it's a very interesting analysis. So please share it if you can in the comments section. But I want to get to your question. Because guys, this is the double doff of the hat. I don't think I've ever double doffed the hat. Here we go. He says, firstly, some curveballs. Oh, firstly, some curveballs. Number one, I got to tell you, Jed, when I read this, I was sitting here this morning having my iced tea, smoking my very first cigarette of the day, going through emails. I saw your email. I opened it up. I read this, and I literally laughed and paced around the house for about 5 minutes. Anyway, he says, number one, concerning the argument that NASA's Orion capsule needs to be tested against radiation and passing through the Van Allen belts, as opposed to the Apollo model that appears to have accomplished this, could the longevity, listen carefully, because we had this in Das's commentary, we just had it with Liquid 911. Now here comes the application. Here comes a bit of dot connecting that I've never heard anyone do. Could the longevity of life of Apollo astronauts be less in part due to shielding from radiation and more in part due to the taxpayer-funded but not for public consumption medical health scheme of the elite? That being a medical cure has existed for some decades for any ailment contracted by such exposure and was issued to the Apollo crews. Now, folks, there's another doff of the hat. What he's just said, abstract the principle from what he just observed. Could there be a medical cure for the effects caused by exposure to radiation? Now let's go with that. And let's say, yes, there is. What are the implications? Well, first of all, if you've got a cure to perhaps even lethal doses of radiation, then what just happened is nuclear war becomes fightable and winnable. Okay? Now let's look at what radiation does. There are many kinds of radiation, but in a nuclear weapon, most of the radiation that you would be exposed to in the form of fallout would be in the form of particles, alpha particles, thermal neutrons. In other words, think of a shotgun firing billions of neutrons at you and through your body. It's like you've just been hit with a shotgun and you're going to simply fall apart. There are other kinds of radiation. X-ray radiation, gamma ray radiation, very deadly, particularly gamma rays, because it's very, very penetrating, all right? And that's very deadly. And what it does, again, is it causes the cells to fall apart. Now, Jed, let me direct your attention. I'm going to be reading to you folks. For the first time, a question has prompted me to give you footnotes, okay? Let me direct your attention, Jed, and everybody else, to this book, spiral bound, as you can see, called Gravitobiology. And please note the subtitles here: New Biophysics, Soviet Energetics, Biological Weaponry, I'm reading backwards here, Electromagnetic Warfare, Woodpecker Over the Horizon, and Scalar Technology. All right, and this is by Lieutenant Colonel Thomas E. Bearden. All right, now listen carefully here. I've selected a few pages that I want to read to you, because what this, as you can see, it's a fairly hefty work. It's about 100 pages, and it's 8.5 by 11, or as you would call it in Australia, A4 paper. All right, not quite the same thing as 8.5 by 11, but you get the idea. Now, listen carefully, Jed and everybody else, because what we're talking about now, is there a cure? Is there a way that you can reverse the electromagnetic effects of radiation? Well, what about reversing the effects electromagnetically? Okay. Listen to what Bearden says about Soviet electromagnetic medical research in these next quotations. Very carefully, listen. For the bad, we see, and this is page 12, we see a mind-numbing vista where men can, and the Soviets already have done so, utilize electrogravitobiology, EGB he calls it, for terrible new mass weapons of electromagnetic biological warfare. The means for ultimate human enslavement, absolute mental manipulation and control from external means, can be developed, and this will certainly be noticed by would-be dictators and megalomaniacs. The ability to develop and utilize electromagnetic disease-inducing and immediate death-inducing scalar electromagnetic weapons has already been developed by the Soviet Union in secret KGB laboratories. We will not dwell extensively on the potential horrors of such electromagnetic biological warfare. With the new weapons, any nation on Earth can be devastated physically, mentally, or both, relatively simply and in short order, with tens and even hundreds of millions of prompt casualties. We point out that small tactical electromagnetic biowarfare death ray weapons have already been clandestinely tested by the Soviets in Afghanistan accounting for the smirch or instant kill, quote unquote, nerve gas attacks, so called. When a body was struck by this weapon, not a single twitch or movement resulted in it thereafter, ever again. Not a single nerve impulse firing occurred ever again in the struck body. Every cell, bacterium, virus, paramecium, etc. in the entire body was instantly dead. The body simply fell like a limp dish rag and lay crumpled and still where it fell. A decisive signature of this weapon was that with every cell and bacterium dead, the dead bodies did not decay for an extended period, even 30 days, precisely as they had been deeply irradiated with cobalt-60 nuclear gamma radiation. No gas or chemical attack can do that, unquote. Now, turning to another page, listen carefully. This is from page 18. The infolded deterministic electromagnetic wave structure inside the scalar electromagnetic potential is called the information content of the field by Soviet scientists. The Soviets know that it is this infolded hidden electromagnetic structure that is the internalized or covert electromagnetic energy of the potential field that is deterministically utilized by biological systems in all their cellular control and regulatory functions. Stop. What Bearden just told you is that that quaternion analysis that I talk about way back in Giza Death Star Deployed and again in SS Brotherhood of the Bell, where the scalar component of the quaternion represents an infolded structure of zero translation vectors. In other words, vectors summing to zero with different structures in that internal structure. What he's just said is that biological living life uses that as the regulating mechanism of life. So in other words, if you know the template, so to speak, of that infolded structure of whatever organism you're dealing with, and you time reverse the template that you're dealing with, you can create life or restore life or destroy it with the same technology. All right? Now, once you've grasped that, once you really wrap your noodle, and I grant you, this is noodle baking stuff, all right? Now let me go on to this lengthy quotation from page 29. Listen carefully. Electromagnetic healing works this way. Number one, the Kazanachayev cryptopathic signals, and this he's talking about a Russian doctor who did research in the Soviet Union in precisely this area of biological electromagnetic healing, all right? The signals for a specific cellular disease is phase conjugated. In other words, it's time reversed, all right? This produces a specific healing signal complex. The complex signal may also be powerfully amplified by pumped four-wave mixing techniques using a pumped phase conjugate mirror. I've talked about phase conjugate mirrors in my books, all right? They're simply waves that do not refract normally in the physical medium, all right? In other words, they are, so to speak, time reversed. Two, the healing signal complex is infolded into a structured potential standing wave. So in other words, you create a standing wave with that phase conjugated template in an organism suffering a disease, and the template that you're creating in that standing wave is the template of the normal healthy cells. Okay, with me? The healing signal complex is enfolded into a structured Whittaker potential standing wave. By Whittaker's 1904 paper, this enfolds the signal complex into one or both of the two potentials that are involved in the production of a normal electromagnetic wave. The process yields, for example, a normal electromagnetic wave which has been internally altered with the hidden information content of that healing signal. Or if one wishes, one may simply utilize a single Whittaker standing potential wave directly enfolding the healing signal complex within it. 3. The wave with its healing information or content or structure is broadcast into a targeted living body, where it gradually charges up or activates the body's master cellular control system with the desired healing signal complex. In turn, the cellular control system carries this complex to every cell of the body, gradually activating all of them with the signal. At the same time, the immune system is conditioned and charged and activated for the specific healing process. Now, let me go to another quotation very briefly. Let me find it here. Give me just a second, folks. Whoops. I think I read them all. All right. Yeah, I did. Okay, now let's look at what he's really saying here, everybody. If you pass through a zone of radiation and are exposed to whatever degree of harmful exposure of that radiation, up to but excluding the point of death, that radiation is a signal that is producing a template of action in the electromagnetic response of the cells. So therefore, how do you reverse it? You take the signal of the healthy cell and dose yourself, submerge yourself in it. Now let's stop and remember what Royal Raymond Rife was doing. What was he doing? Well, he was exposing people to what? To vibration of a certain frequency to kill viruses and restore health. What was the French physician Alain Prieur doing? The same thing, okay? So in other words, yeah, you could do this. Liquid 911 in the chat room is asking, could you do this remotely? Yes. Bingo. So what do we got, Liquid? What do we got, Jed? We've got that little capsule going through the Van Allen belts. Let's assume that they have this technology and they're simply beaming the signal to the capsule as it's going through the Van Allen radiation belts, okay? Do they have a longevity technology? Probably. Do they have a technology of longevity that is not pharmaceutical, but rather electromagnetic in nature? I think so. Ask yourself, does George Soros or David Rockefeller eat GMO food and take lots of pills? Do they subscribe to the very thing that they're pushing on everybody else? Probably not. There's the connection. Bingo. Entrainment. Empath says entrainment in the chat room. Absolutely. Number 2. Apollo 11 Commander Neil Armstrong on occasion appeared to be leaking information, such as his 1994 25th anniversary speech and claims by others about what he said he saw on the mission. Could it be that when Neil Armstrong began leaking that he would receive a visitor who would sit down with him and go through the bag of mission souvenirs in his closet, reminding Neil to look at the items, remember the mission as it was debriefed. There is no more, there is no less. Remember, Neil, remember, unquote. So in other words, could Neil Armstrong's keeping of that very bizarre array of objects from the Apollo mission in his closet, could that have been a hypnotic trigger to keep him from leaking or telling things? Absolutely. Jed, I'm going to suggest to you that you go on YouTube and Google Darren Brown, the famous British illusionist magician, all right? And this guy's a real magician. He's the genuine thing. This is not illusionist magic. This is the real stuff, all right? Google Darren Brown and then watch the show that he did where he convinced somebody right there on camera that he had committed a murder, all right? And watch how he does it. He does it with physical reminders, with touch, with sounds, and so on. Constant subliminal reinforcement. And that's what you're suggesting. Could that be a mind manipulation technique that they used with the Apollo astronauts? Well, again, go look at the MK Ultra stuff, particularly the mind manipulators, and you'll see absolutely this is a technique. And remember, Sirhan, the alleged assassin of Senator Robert Kennedy, what is he busily writing? RFK must die, over and over and over and over in his notebook. RFK must die. So in other words, what's that? That's, again, a hypnotic, physical, subliminal reinforcement. And it's planting nice evidence in the alleged assassin's own handwriting that he's the guilty culprit, okay? And he's not even standing in the right position to shoot Senator Kennedy fatally, okay? So could they do it? Yeah, all right. Remember Philip K. Dick. Well, that's another thing. We won't even get into that. All right, number 3. Curveball after curveball here, folks. If the 2 eyewitnesses of Malaysia Air 370 are to be believed, that is, an oil rig worker saw an object on fire descend into the sea of south of Vietnam, and a lady on a yacht saw what she described as, quote, looking longer than planes usually do, with 2 orange lights like sodium street lamps trailing smoke, unquote, heading west near Nicobar Island. And if seeing is believing, or believing is seeing, then do you see what I see? There were 2 separate objects. A disintegrated Boeing 777 South Vietnam is identified by Chinese satellite images, but that evidence was withdrawn with haste. A second object, damaged, tracking west, then south, seeking sanctuary and protection from detection in the magnetic vortices off the West Australian coast, was the 777 collateral damage for the far greater prize that the search operation attempted to recover. Possibly. I'm still of the opinion Flight 370 simply went poof. The reason I think that is, again, the timing of these eyewitness statements. They're coming out too late. To me, what we're dealing with could be a case of that Roswell dialectic again. And again, that South China satellite image, I saw that image when it came out, Jed. And when I saw it, I said, that's not an airplane. There's not enough flotsam and detritus there to be an airplane. So I'm still kind of in a, they don't know what the heck happened to it. But I do like this magnetic vortices idea off of Western Australia. The bottom line here, Jed, for me is there's something mighty fishy about Flight 370. And none of the other conspiracy theories make much sense to me. I think it's a genuine, huge mystery of enormous technological capability being displayed. Now, with that said, I want to suggest one more thing to you, Jed. I don't know if in Australia you've seen the American television series that just ran 1 season in this country before they yanked it. Okay. And the series is kind of interesting. It's called The Event, all right? And it just so happens that the President of the United States of America is black. He happens to be Hispanic black on top of it, okay? And it's about the president almost getting ready to make the formal disclosure announcement. E.T. is here and among us, okay? And at the last minute, he's prevented from doing so by a sequence of events that sets up the whole series in that season. And the event that begins the series is that an airplane, a civil airliner, is hijacked by one of these extraterrestrial pilots who looks, talks, walks, and smells human, okay? There's just a slight genetic difference. And by the way, they live a long time too, okay? Just to sweeten the pot. And as the plane is flying towards the president's compound, a technology is activated, and the plane is simply goes poof, it disappears, and crashes 2,000 miles away in Arizona. Okay, so you know there's like it or not, you can call me a kook. You know, I don't care, because I've been on this MH370 simply went poof, because I'm not satisfied that the evidence of eyewitnesses and stuff, there's eyewitnesses stories with this thing, and they're all mutually contradictory. So when you look at eyewitnesses, we've got the people saying, well, yeah, I saw it flying across Malaysia. No, I saw it flying behind a civilian airliner in India. There's all these eyewitness testimonies. The problem is the data set was badly obfuscated almost from the beginning. And that tells me that there's something hugely wrong, and that this airliner, for whatever reason, may have been the victim of a very, very weird, sophisticated technology, either deliberately employed or gone array accidentally. But there's a huge mystery here, and I haven't seen anything to dissuade me from that. Anyway, that's it, folks. That's that. We made it through the Vidchat, guys, tonight, all the way without any interruptions. So I'm going to have one more cigarette, stick around for a couple of minutes with you guys and chat with you. Great questions tonight, guys. Chat with you in the chat room a bit, and then when I get done doing that, I'm going to sign off and go make my supper, and then do 4 days more of blogging. I'm going to be up all night tonight on an all-nighter, working on some blogs, and maybe if I get them done in jig time, then doing a little work on the book. So anyway, great questions, guys. And I really love question 1. I love that sort of stuff, because he's pointed out one of the obvious flaws in the Apollo thing, in the Apollo hoax thing, and that is an advanced medical technology. You betcha. You betcha. And why, Jed, is that? Let's just flesh that one out a little bit more. Jed, I don't know how much you've done with my Bell research, but let's remember, one of the people involved in the medical aspects of limiting the effects of the Bell was, guess who? Dr. Hubertus Strugholt, right? Who was brought over to this country to become the head of NASA's Space Medicine Project. Why would you need a man interested in protecting people from the deadly field and radioactive effects of the Bell? Huh? There's a little tidbit there that helps connect the dots just a little bit more. Great stuff tonight. Great stuff. Great stuff. A fun vid chat, guys. This was a fun one. And for me, somebody expressed concern about my sinuses. My sinuses have been much, much better in the last week. I've had, you can hear I'm much, much more open. I can actually breathe through my nostrils to a certain extent, which I'm very, very seldom able to do because of that cartilage that's growing partially across both nostrils. So anyway, wonderful stuff. Wonderful stuff. Very interesting. Sehr interessant, yeah? And where was that four-wave mixing phenomena discovered as well? Again, the Third Reich. So yeah, this was a whopper. You're welcome, empath. No, pollen I don't have that much bad allergies to. Pollen I don't have that much problem with. Certain kinds of pollen, yes. Yeah, this was a really good one. This was a really good one. But anyway, yeah, I'll stick around here for a couple more minutes. I'm glad you could listen in today, Philly Gale. Let me see, how many people are in here? 40. I'm counting 40. And in case I didn't say hello to any of you, let me check real fast here. I think I got everybody. We had our first Chinese participant tonight, guys. That's feeling groovy. So welcome to China. Anyway, yeah, best thorium toothpaste. Was there a First and Second Reich? Yes, in Nazi propaganda, the First Reich was the Holy Roman Empire of the German emperors, the Heilige Römische Kaiserreich der Deutschen Nation. Okay, that was the official title in German. And then the Second Reich was the German Empire that was founded at Versailles in 1871, Kaiser Wilhelm I, and then, of course, up to Kaiser Wilhelm II. That was the Second Reich. And then the Third Reich, of course, was Nazi Germany. So it was the Third Reich in reckoning of actual German empires, the way the Nazis. In other words, to call it the Third Reich, that's the way the Nazis referred to it. That's what they were referring to. If they have the ability to reverse or affect time, why don't they let Hillary or Dick Cheney have a go at it? Please no. We don't need Dick Cheney as president. That's a fate worse than Hillary. That's a pretty bad fate, too. Oh, wow. You know, to me, again, folks, I'm sitting on the sidelines this election year, and I'm going to eat popcorn and watch the theater. Oh, my. Yep, no problem, free fall. No problem. All right, folks, I'm stopping the video. I'm going to stick around and chat for just a few minutes. So signing off here, folks. Thanks for all the great questions. We'll see you in the next Vidchat. Be watching for the Vidchat schedule, incidentally. I haven't done the schedule for the next couple months. So I'm going to be posting the schedule sometime in the next couple weeks. I imagine I'm just going to keep to the 2-week schedule unless something comes up. So 2 weeks from now. So we'll see you on the flip side in 2 weeks, everybody. I'll stay in the chat room here for a few minutes, everybody. But I'm signing off on the audio and the video. Bye-bye and God bless.